the sky above the fortress bled into shades of bruised purple and charcoal gray, a fitting shroud for a place so deliberately isolated, so far removed from any map or comforting landmark. Imagine a figure, cloaked in shadow, moving with a predator's grace through the silent, echoing corridors of that very stronghold. Every turn was a calculated risk, a momentary pause to gauge the unseen, to listen for the faint stirrings of a presence that might betray his intricate dance. He navigated through a cavernous chamber where two colossal statues stood sentinel, their stony gazes fixed upon the formidable doors rumored to lead directly to the Demon King's inner sanctum. Yet these were not his intended path. Instead, he swept past them, his trajectory leading him toward an open casement overlooking the castle's desolate exterior. Below, a demonic guard patrolled, its heavy boots marking the cadence of its vigilance. Though armed with a formidable axe and clad in thick armor, the creature proved no match for the man, whose silent descent from the window culminated in a swift, precise strike that severed the guard's throat. The demon fell without a sound, its lifeblood staining the desolate ground as the cloaked figure resheathed his blade. He then cast his gaze upward at the towering structure, a silent challenge in his eyes before producing a grappling hook. With practiced ease, he began his ascent toward the highest reaches of the castle. His climb concluded at a door, shimmering with the telltale distortion of a magical barrier. Undeterred, the man concentrated a focused energy into his index finger, aiming it directly at the pulsating shield. With an almost casual touch, he pierced not only the magical defense, but also shattered the glass pane directly behind it. Removing the now redundant lock, he pushed open the window door, stepping into an elevated position directly above the Demon King's opulent throne. He descended in a controlled drop, landing softly as the figure seated upon the throne immediately sensed his arrival. The Demon King swiveled, her gaze locking onto his, a sardonic comment about an interesting guest hanging in the air. But how had this man, this shadow, arrived here, and what was his true purpose? Only a few hours prior, a different scene had unfolded. A small cohort, nestled deep within the Demon King's meeting hall, had paused their arduous journey to finalize their next move. Their gazes were fixed on a sprawling map, their consensus pointing toward a direct assault through the main doors. However, the cloaked man, Roland, harbored a different strategy, one that leveraged his unique skill set for a far less conventional approach. His suggestion was met with immediate, unanimous disbelief. His companions, among them the warrior Illyria, the high priestess Serapin, Lena the sorcerer, and Elvi the holy knight, dismissed his alternative as impossible, even foolhardy, convinced he would only plunge to his death. Laughter echoed briefly through their ranks until Illyria, their resolute leader, recaptured their attention. She reiterated that their original battle strategy would stand without alteration. Illyria, Serapin, Lena, and Elvi would collectively draw the Demon King's formidable attention. Meanwhile, Roland, employing his unique abilities, would remain unseen, waiting for the opportune moment to strike, to deliver the decisive blow. Roland, his face etched with a quiet intensity, sought Illyria's confirmation. Was she truly comfortable with him making the kill, he asked, believing perhaps it was the knight's inherent duty. Illyria, however, stood firm in her conviction. Her plan, she insisted, presented their highest probability of success. They had endured too much, journeyed too far to falter now. Roland remained silent for a beat, a flicker of contemplation in his dark eyes before offering a simple, "I understand." A faint smile touched Illyria's lips at his response. She suggested a brief reprieve, a moment of rest before their combined effort. Soon, the group succumbed to sleep, preparing for the looming battle. Roland, too, appeared to slumber, but his stillness was a carefully crafted deception. In the pre-dawn quiet, he made himself imperceptible, beginning his stealthy departure from their hiding spot. Yet Illyria's keen senses pierced his illusion. "Where are you going?" she whispered, her voice a low murmur in the dark. The dark-haired man offered a subtle grin. "Just a moment," he replied, his tone surprisingly light, causing Illyria a beat of confusion. He clarified, a touch of mischief in his voice, that he merely sought the facilities, inquiring if she wished to accompany him. A flush crept up Allyria's cheeks. Embarrassed by her earlier question, she simply urged him to return swiftly, a quiet bewilderment at his unwavering calm, no matter the circumstance, settling over her. Roland seized the opportunity, his true destination not a bathroom, but the Demon King herself. And now, here he stood, facing her, a storm of lightning already crackling from her outstretched hand. Jagged bolts of pure energy tore through the chamber, rending stone and sending debris scattering across the floor, yet none found their mark on Roland. He was no longer in the same spot, nor was there any discernible trace of his passage. The Demon King's initial confusion quickly shifted to frustration as she perceived him behind her. She wheeled around, unleashing another devastating attack, only for it to meet empty air. Roland's speed was maddening. A voice, cool and precise, then echoed in the chamber, a subtle provocation. "When was your last real battle? Have you truly seen skills like these?" Believing she finally had him cornered, the Demon King summoned a formidable sword, sweeping it in a furious arc that gouged a vast chasm in the floor, seemingly tearing the very room asunder. Still, Roland was nowhere to be seen. She scoffed, her head snapping around wildly, searching for him, until in a sudden, heart-stopping instant, she found him. Inches from her face, a blade pressed lightly against her forehead. Roland retracted his weapon, and the Demon King crumpled, a crimson bloom spreading from a wound on her head. Her gaze fell to the floor, her voice barely a whisper as she conceded defeat. The Demon King's army, she decreed, would be dissolved, its remnants ordered to retreat, never again to threaten humanity. But Roland, with an unexpected interjection, cut her off. "That won't be happening," he stated, his expression unreadable as he looked down upon her. He offered her a final wish should she possess one. The Demon King, her soft smile a stark contrast to the severity of the moment, looked up. Roland swiftly departed the castle. Meanwhile, Allyria and her group, having completed their diversion, arrived only to find the Demon King already fallen, seemingly dead before they had even engaged. Roland, for his part, made his way back to the city, where the king himself awaited. The monarch, deeply impressed by Roland's slaying of the Demon King, a ruler renowned for her cruelty and a force that had driven them to such desperate measures, showered him with praise. The king acknowledged the collective efforts that had brought them to the castle's gates, but his awe remained fixed on Roland's singular confrontation. Roland, however, dismissed his own achievement with characteristic humility. Assassins like him, he asserted, possessed an exceptional advantage in one-on-one combat, implying no special feat had been accomplished. He even downplayed his unique concealment skill, the ability to vanish into a state of temporary non-existence, undetectable by any means, claiming it was nothing extraordinary. Despite Roland's self-effacement, the king had received a report from Allyria and the others. Their combat prowess and strategic acumen, they had unequivocally stated, had undergone a significant transformation since Roland joined their ranks. They readily admitted they would have stood no chance against the Demon King on their own, acknowledging their inability to reach her castle without his presence. Yet, Roland continued to minimize his contributions, drawing a weary sigh from the king at his unwavering persistence. The old man then informed Roland that the title of legendary assassin awaited him, a fitting honor for vanquishing the Demon King. But Roland harbored no desire for such accolades. His wish was for Allyria and the others to receive full credit for the Demon King's demise, a request the king had anticipated, having been present when Roland first mentioned it upon accepting the quest. Roland believed that Allyria, as the first princess of the Furland Kingdom, deserved the recognition, having already earned the title of genius through her own merit, even if her father, the king, hadn't yet formally acknowledged it. Still, the king found himself reluctant to let Roland depart empty-handed. He offered the dark-haired man any wish, a promise to make it a reality. Roland knew precisely what he desired, though it seemed a nearly impossible aspiration. His prolonged silence, however, prompted the king to jump to a startling conclusion. Roland, he surmised, harbored affections for Allyria. The king frantically attempted to dissuade Roland from such a union, but Roland quickly allayed his fears. He did not, he assured the old man, wish for his daughter's hand. The mere mention of Illyria brought a memory to Roland's mind. The warrior girl's earlier expression of a longing for a normal life, a wish that had perplexed her companions. Roland, in that moment, resolved to claim that very wish for himself. He no longer desired the life of an assassin. Peace, devoid of trickery or deceit, was his sole aspiration, a normal existence, free from the constant shadow of betrayal. A normal life was all Roland truly sought, a request so remarkably simple that it stunned King Randolph. The monarch, still intent on showering Roland with rewards, pressed him, suggesting he could wish for a retinue of women, given that producing children was among his own proudest achievements. Roland, however, curtly dismissed the king's jovial insistence. Randolph then inquired if Roland required anything further for this new, ordinary life. Roland replied simply that he did not, offering a polite word of thanks to Randolph. The two men exchanged a handshake, and Roland prepared to exit the room. Outside, a cat awaited Roland, its unexpected presence sparking the old man's curiosity about stray animals within the castle. But this was no ordinary feline. It padded down the hall, then paused, scratching at its collar, drawing Roland's attention. He knelt, his fingers brushing the pendant on the collar, which immediately began to glow. In a sudden, ethereal transformation, the cat floated skyward, resolving into the form of a woman, the very woman Roland had faced earlier. Leela, breathing a sigh of relief, admitted her brief tenure as a cat had been less than pleasant, but quickly set the thought aside, resuming her walk alongside Roland. The former Demon King revealed she had overheard his wish, expressing disbelief that he had struggled to articulate a desire, only to settle on an ordinary life. Leela then explained the two abilities of her necklace, transformation and the regulation of its owner's magic power, should it exceed a safe threshold. Roland, in turn, quipped that he recalled a demon king vanquished by a weird guy in less than 10 minutes. Leela, far from offended, countered that the weird guy had, in her eyes, proven to be a rather lovely man. She revealed that his only reason for sparing her life was his inability to utilize the necklace, but professed indifference to any harsh treatment or even sale, expressing profound gratitude that he had, at least, removed the restrictive ornament. She even went so far as to call him sweet for an assassin. Roland chuckled. From this moment forth, he declared, he was no longer an assassin. With Leela leaning comfortably on his arm, they stepped out the door. She inquired about their destination, to which Roland simply replied, "Anywhere that's considered normal." This answer, however, provoked a complaint from Leela, who found the prospect utterly boring. Roland, in turn, warned her that excitement was not something he intended to provide. In that moment, Roland shed his cloak, letting it billow into the night sky, a symbolic gesture of the new man he had become. He recalled their initial encounter, her vow to offer everything to whoever could defeat her, her assertion that he was simply a worthy partner. Yet, Roland harbored a quiet doubt about the sincerity of her words. Being human, he wondered if he truly understood the nuances of a demon's way of life. He then noticed Leela's ears, flushed crimson, and inquired if she was well. She responded with a small squeak, burying herself under the covers in embarrassment. Suddenly, a knock at the door interrupted them, followed by a voice calling Roland's name. Roland, remembering he had chosen that name for himself, quickly dressed. The voice outside, it turned out, belonged to a woman there to collect the week's rental fees. He handed her the money, and she thanked him, though her curiosity lingered on the persistent, inexplicable sounds emanating from his room daily, regardless of the hour. Her question was cut short by a soft meow as a cat, Leela in her transformed state, emerged from the room, diverting the woman's attention. Roland quickly explained it away as merely mishearing the cat's meows. The woman, flustered, profusely apologized. Roland, momentarily perplexed by her reaction, was soon clarified. She hadn't been inquiring about strange noises, but rather his profession. It was a stark realization. Normal men held jobs. He would need one, he understood, as his current funds were dwindling. While he could, of course, approach King Randolph for more, that was not the normal life he envisioned. He confessed to the woman that he was currently job-seeking. She then suggested the life of an adventurer, but Roland dismissed it, claiming he wasn't physically suited for such endeavors. The girl agreed, noting his slender physique before humming thoughtfully. A moment later, she proposed a position as staff at the Adventurers Guild. Upon his arrival at the guild, he was greeted by a young woman. Roland stated his purpose: recruitment. The girl, in turn, called for the chief. A woman emerged, instructing him to follow her to the back for an interview. He complied, believing he simply needed to perform his best. The woman, Iris Nagin, introduced herself as the branch director of the guild. Roland reciprocated, then took a seat, beginning the interview. However, each question he faced was met with a negative answer. Iris sighed, a hint of frustration in her voice, explaining they couldn't simply accept anyone. She expressed her dislike for his indifferent, monotonous tone, prompting Roland to apologize. He pondered how he could convey his experience without revealing his true past. Iris sighed again, asserting that his background was irrelevant. What mattered was capability. She intended to judge him on his abilities. Suddenly, the interview seemed to take a far simpler turn for Roland. "What do you mean by capable?" he inquired. Iris's response outlined the necessary proficiencies: skill with a sword, a fundamental grasp of magic, and an understanding of item inspection. Despite her words, Roland imperceptibly flicked his wrist towards the window. Iris, puzzled, turned to look. In that fleeting moment, Roland vanished, swiftly moved behind her, removed her underwear, and returned to his seat, all without her noticing. Iris turned back to him, as Roland confidently declared his complete capability in all the areas she mentioned. She laughed, dismissing his confidence, adding that the ability for rapid cloth changing was also a necessary skill. The dark-haired man then held up her underwear. "Is this sufficient?" he asked, her confusion quickly transforming into extreme fluster as she recognized the garment. Clutching her skirt, she stammered, demanding to know what kind of magic he had used. Roland, however, knew it was merely his concealment skill, utilized with maximum efficiency. It was his first foray into pilfering underwear, yet he considered himself a professional. Still, he wondered if such an act truly constituted an ordinary interview. Iris struggled to form words, her face still ablaze with embarrassment. Roland, inferring she might find it easier to speak if he returned the item, promptly did so, reactivating his ability to replace it. She noticed her embarrassment intensifying. "Am I capable enough now for the job?" Roland pressed. Iris grumbled, admitting he had barely passed the test. Unwilling to accept such a lukewarm assessment, Roland's insistence caused Iris to grit her teeth before finally shouting that she absolutely wanted to hire him, asserting they couldn't manage without him. Roland smiled, satisfied with her definitive answer, then departed the building. He glanced back at it, a quiet understanding settling within him. He would continue his best to cultivate this normal life he so desired. The following day, Roland prepared for his first shift in his new, ordinary existence, dressing meticulously and donning a pair of glasses. Leela, in her cat form, inquired about his destination. He replied he was off to his normal job. She expressed her pleasure at his apparent contentment, but he reminded her to behave in his absence. She promised no trouble in her current feline guise. Roland quickly made his way to the guild, where Milia MacGuffin, the familiar girl at the desk, greeted him. She was genuinely impressed he had passed the interview, noting that his direct recruitment by Iris, rather than through other guild facilities, spoke volumes about his skill. Milia, not pressing further, simply expressed her excitement at finally being a superior to someone, conveying this to Roland. Before they began, she offered him a quick tour of the facility. As the dark-haired man surveyed his new surroundings, he asked Milia what, precisely, adventurers actually did. His question surprised her. She hadn't anticipated such a fundamental inquiry. Milia explained that adventurers fulfilled various requests, from retrieving materials in perilous dungeons to seeking hidden treasures, all in exchange for monetary reward. Roland, however, seemed to distill her detailed explanation into a simpler, less flattering summation. Adventurers were merely rookies who do whatever they're asked to. Milia admonished him, warning against such pronouncements within the guild. Just then, she noticed some adventurers returning with collected materials. She led Roland over to a man named Morley, who immediately asked about Roland's adventuring experience. Roland admitted he had none, prompting Morley to insult him, asserting Roland had no business impeding a C-rank adventurer like himself. Milia clarified that C-rank adventurers constituted only 10% of all adventurers, implying a significant level of strength. Roland, however, seemed disappointed by the arrogant demeanor of such a purportedly strong individual. Morley's task was to tally the collected herbs for the adventurer's quest. He confidently declared all items present. Roland, however, observed that other herbs were mistakenly mixed in with the required imogo leaves. Morley bristled, shouting about his expertise as a plant master and demanding an apology. Roland, unfazed, picked up 2 leaves, pointing out the distinct black dots on one, absent from the other. The dotted ones, he explained, were cereri, devoid of detoxification properties, meaning only half the collected herbs were viable. Morley, furious, lunged to punch him, but Roland effortlessly sidestepped, sending Morley sprawling. Humiliated, Morley slammed the door as he departed. Milia sighed in relief, impressed by Roland's botanical knowledge. Roland, in his typical understated manner, simply stated that failing a task could mean death. He made other comments that initially confused Milia until she laughed, believing he was merely joking. Roland, however, made a mental note. The people here operated with a different mindset than he was accustomed to. The next day, Roland was assigned the mundane task of tidying a corner of the room. Milia attempted to assist, but Morley intervened, insisting she needn't bother, as Iris would surely dismiss Roland soon enough. Reluctantly, Milia left. Roland, turning toward the disarray, found an almost surprising contentment in the normalcy of the task. A voice then chimed, revealing Leela had followed him, bored by her solitude. Roland tried to concentrate, but soon overheard a conversation. People discussing the Demon King's defeat, speculating that subjugation quests would decrease, potentially harming the trading business. Roland wondered if Illyria and the others were celebrating their victory in a kingdom-wide parade. Leela asked if he truly was fine with this, but Roland insisted he was. His persistence, however, earned her observation that it was a waste. Eventually, Roland completed his tidying. Milia, impressed by his speed, invited the tall man to share her lunch during their break. As they ate, Roland's attention was drawn to someone walking out the back door. He went to investigate, immediately encountering a group of adventurers agitated that he hadn't accepted their materials earlier. Roland noticed Morley observing from a distance. Unwilling to engage, Roland attempted to leave, prompting their leader to lunge and attempt a punch. Roland knew that using violence would cause significant trouble for him, which was precisely why Morley was lurking nearby. So, he subtly shifted, allowing the punch to land in a way that would break the assailant's fingers without Roland actively retaliating. The leader, clutching his hand, called on another man to try. Roland, however, had no desire to waste his lunch break or delay his return to his normal job. Employing his concealment skill, he swiftly incapacitated all the men in the area. The last remaining person, a woman, gasped, asking who he was. She realized he was no ordinary employee, but her thoughts were interrupted as Roland pinned her against the wall, beginning to charm her. Morley, regaining consciousness, peered around the corner, bewildered by the sounds. What he saw was Roland and the woman engaged in a passionate embrace, filling him with horror and confusion. This was Tanya, a woman he secretly harbored feelings for, and now nothing would come of it. Roland returned from his break, and Milia informed him that new staff typically began at the front desk before being assigned more suitable positions. She handed him a guidebook to memorize. He seemed to absorb its contents in seconds, though he didn't mention it. Milia then took her place at the front desk, assisting people while Roland observed, learning the ropes. A man approached, seeking a quest. Milia requested his identification paper. The man's behavior was erratic, frantic, a detail Roland noted. He then asked for every D-rank quest that needed completion that day. Roland took a closer look at the paper. It was fake, he told Milia, explaining the magical modification and the man's odd demeanor. The man grew impatient, but Milia held her ground, asserting the paper was counterfeit. He still insisted it was real, even as Morley advised her to just apologize. She did, but it changed nothing. Roland decided to take matters into his own hands, attempting to use fire magic on the document. It was protected by a barrier spell, only serving to highlight the deception. Roland intensified the flame, successfully incinerating the paper. The man cried out in frustration, admitting its cost. He realized his mistake as Roland explained that all his associated goods would now be disabled. Internally, Roland felt a pang of disappointment at the amateurish disguise. He himself would have chosen a victim's identity, far harder to uncover once one possessed genuine credentials. Roland then informed the man that it was fortunate he was an adventurer and not an assassin, or he would be dead. Despite the coolness of the remark, everyone present was simply confused. Milia, remembering, stated they needed to contact the knights. The man bolted, but Roland was faster, quickly incapacitating him, making the knight's eventual capture far simpler. Later that day, Milia, awestruck by Roland's skills, thanked him. He dismissed her gratitude, stating he merely wished to ensure her safety. Her heart quickened as she gazed at him dreamily. Roland, recognizing the effect he had, resolved that he needed to strive even harder to achieve a truly normal demeanor. The next day, Morley attempted to invite Milia out for lunch, as it was her day off. Unfortunately for him, she already had plans, prompting a frustrated groan from Morley. As Roland went about his usual tidying, Milia approached him, curious about his living situation. He informed her he was staying at an inn. Milia, surprised, noted that common folk typically resided in houses near their workplaces. This detail struck Roland. A house, he realized, was the true embodiment of a normal life, a stability he hadn't considered, having never required long-term accommodation in his previous profession. Given his living status, Milia wondered if the dark-haired man had managed proper meals since arriving. Leela, observing the interaction, found Milia's concern annoying and noisy. Milia, hearing a woman's voice but seeing no one else, grew confused before quickly refocusing. She offered to help Roland find an ideal house, leveraging her local knowledge. As she walked away, Roland felt a flicker of confusion. Milia had told Morley she was busy the next day. Leela, however, explained it was merely a gentle way of declining, a common female behavior. Roland mused that being a woman sounded rather tiring. The following day, Roland and Milia met outside the guild. Milia attempted to pet Leela, still in her cat form, but Leela pointedly ignored her, much to Milia's surprise. Shrugging it off, Milia focused on leading Roland to the first house. Leela, however, seemed to disapprove, so they moved on. After viewing numerous properties, they finally stumbled upon a house that had long been vacant, previously owned by an adventurer. It carried a strange history. Sudden disappearances had plagued anyone who attempted to live there. Despite Milia's apprehension, both Roland and Leela seemed content with the place. As they prepared to inspect the interior, both suddenly sensed something, urging Milia to wait outside. The two stepped inside, discovering a room from which a palpable dark aura emanated. Within it, they found a dark phantasm. Leela calmly instructed Roland to handle it. He focused magic into his arm, delivering a single punch that obliterated the creature in seconds, leaving behind only a fallen rock. Milia, worried by the strange noises, cautiously entered. Roland, quickly changing the subject, declared he would take the place, explaining he had no luggage for her to help with. Milia, eager to spend more time with the dark-haired man, insisted she would cook lunch, hurrying off before he could respond. Roland touched Leela's collar, and she returned to her true form. He suggested they do it, causing Leela to blush shyly, hinting that Milia could return at any moment. Roland countered that they should finish before then. Leela leaned in for a kiss, only to realize his true intent was for them to clean. Roland, oblivious to her expectation, instructed her on which areas to clean while he handled the rest. Frustrated, she pushed him away, storming off, only to fall through the unstable floorboards, prompting a sigh from Roland. Most of the cleaning was complete when Milia returned, her expression impressed. She set down lunch, and Roland introduced Leela. Milia, however, felt a pang of fear upon learning Leela was a demon. He reassured her that Leela was incapable of using magic, which calmed the girl until she noticed Leela already sampling their lunch. The three shared their meal, and Milia offered to help with the remaining cleaning. Roland agreed, despite Leela's complaints. The two women found themselves cleaning in the same room. Milia observed Leela struggling, prompting her to tease the demon woman. Annoyed, Leela attempted to summon one of her companions from the darkness, but nothing happened. Milia's teasing intensified. After more commotion and additional cleaning, the house was finally pristine. Milia then invited Roland to dinner at her house, citing the effort it would take to prepare a meal now. Leela, though initially reluctant, found Roland not opposed to the idea. On their way, Milia inquired about the strange noise from earlier. Roland explained it was a dark phantasm he had vanquished. This revelation shocked Milia. It was a B-rank monster. She wondered about Roland's true strength, but he, true to form, insisted he was normal, even if Milia clearly didn't believe him. They finally arrived at Milia's house, where Roland met her family, finding the experience genuinely enjoyable. The dark-haired man conveyed to Milia's father his appreciation for city life, even sharing his adventurer stories. The older man, however, chuckled, noting the stark difference in the life of a normal man, finding a partner, building a family, raising children. Roland absorbed these words, making a mental note. Milia's father then wondered aloud if Roland received many invitations from women, given his nature and looks. Roland simply smiled, a memory stirring within him. Later, as he walked back to his new house, Leela complained about his late return, only to be interrupted by Roland's kiss, a silent promise of intimacy. The next day, Roland returned to work, greeting Milia, who suggested he try working at the delivery counter for the day. A man, identified by his adventurer ID as Nil, approached the desk. He sought a D-rank quest, having apparently avoided them for some time. Roland scanned the shelf, finding a quest involving the elimination of a bird known as the killer falcon. However, he sought a second opinion, asking Milia if the quest was too challenging for D-rank adventurers. She saw no issue, noting that previous D-rank adventurers had sought similar quests. Morley attempted to interject, arguing they should allow adventurers free rein, but Roland and Milia completely ignored him, continuing their discussion. They eventually agreed to simply assist the adventurer in making his own decision. Nil accepted the quest and departed, but Roland felt a lingering unease. He asked Milia to take over the counter while he stepped out. Iris, observing his departure, inquired about his destination. Roland explained he was checking on a recent adventurer who had taken a quest he was overseeing. Iris then mentioned new rumors circulating about him within the guild, adding that she had also recently learned of his past. He, however, remained largely unconcerned, focused on his role as a normal employee, and continued walking away. Just before he left, he turned, a mischievous glint in his eye, and teased Iris, asking if she had checked her underwear that day, leaving her flustered and indignant as he vanished into the city streets. As he walked, Roland recalled Leela's observation. His glasses subtly altered his appearance and aura. He tucked them into his bag, making his way to a specific clearing in the forest where Nil was expected to be. True to his prediction, the archer was there, attempting to shoot at a large bird that effortlessly dodged every arrow, its talons reaching for the man. Roland, recognizing the peril posed by Nil's tactical errors, approached the archer, offering tips, including the killer falcon's vulnerable points. The bird's primary weakness, he explained, was when it fixed its gaze on prey specifically, moving prey like a human. The falcon was indeed targeting Nil, and Roland subtly implied that Nil should allow the bird to approach, creating an opening, as there was no other viable option. Roland then challenged the man, asserting that if he lacked the courage to fell such a creature at this level, he should abandon his role as an archer. Nil slapped his own face, a spark of motivation igniting within him. He would try, he declared, standing patiently, waiting for the falcon to swoop down. Despite the fear coursing through his body, Nil focused intently, releasing an arrow at the incoming bird. Roland, a faint grin on his face, walked away. He returned to the guild, his glasses back in place, to find Milia's eyes brimming with tears. She had been terribly worried, having been told by Iris that he had merely gone to the bathroom and never emerged for an entire hour. Roland reassured her that all was well. Morley, attempting once again to interject and assert his superiority, was ignored by both as they resumed their duties. Roland continued to assist adventurers with their quest processing. It was almost time to go home when he saw a familiar figure enter, carrying killer falcon feathers. Nil had succeeded. Roland praised him, and the archer, acknowledging he still had much to learn, whispered a heartfelt thanks to Roland. Feigning confusion, Roland asked what Nil was thanking him for. Nil, with a smile, simply brushed it off and exited the guild. Roland, watching him leave, mused that he should probably change his hairstyle next time. Another day, another opportunity to make a good impression at work. It was currently lunch break. Milia shared her meal with some of the other female employees behind the counter, and soon, conversation sparked. One asked about the awesome, new guy, and Milia knew they were referring to Roland. Word had spread of adventurers personally requesting Roland to oversee their quests. Another girl at the table mentioned hearing Roland had defeated a gray bear and saved an adventurer, prompting a gasp of shock from the others. A gray bear was an rank beast. Milia quickly confirmed the story, having witnessed the feat herself. The other two, bewildered, asked how and why Milia had been there, only to learn that the quest had originally been arranged by her. Initially, it was a simple E-rank request to collect nectar from Kay and flowers, seemingly easy enough. However, a significant amount of time had passed without any contact from the adventurer assigned to it. Consequently, Roland and Milia had decided to go out and search for the missing adventurer. The other girls, however, still couldn't fathom why Roland, a rookie, had been dispatched of all people. Milia clarified that it was a direct order from the branch director, Iris herself, suggesting Roland was far from an ordinary employee. She also mentioned it wasn't just the two of them. Roland had brought his cat along. Milia excitedly gushed about how cute the feline was, devouring many of her homemade cookies, even if the cat consistently ignored her. She pondered how to win the cat's affection, but the other two girls exchanged exasperated looks, wondering if this was truly the time to discuss cats. At some point during the rescue mission, Roland and Milia walked through the forest. Milia, growing frantic, pulled out a map, disoriented by their surroundings. Roland, however, seemed to know precisely where to go, having apparently memorized every detail of the quest. Despite never having been to this specific area, they navigated directly to their destination after just one glance at the map. Yet, despite this remarkable ability, he maintained he would forget it all by morning. True or not, who could say? Suddenly, Milia mentioned Roland's ability to engage in internal monologues using both male and female voices, unaware he was simply conversing with Leela. Getting back to the core of the quest, Milia was asked if she had encountered the gray bear. She explained she had been instructed to wait at the entrance, though Roland had returned in about half an hour or so. The other girls were astounded he had completed a subjugation in such a brief time frame. Milia corrected them, clarifying that it seemed the gray bear had simply located its cub, thus ending the situation before any actual subjugation was necessary. A voice then echoed through the guild building. Milia's head popped up in acknowledgement, and she walked into the hall to see who had called. She confirmed workers were present, but explained they were still on lunch break. Then she recognized the small boy, the same one Roland had rescued earlier. He was there to check in with Roland, but Milia informed him that Roland had already left for lunch. However, the very man they had just spoken of entered the door. The boy's face lit up with happiness upon seeing him. He thanked Roland for his actions in the cave the other day. The dark-haired male gently patted the boy's head, advising him to be more careful next time, a scene that caused the three female workers, including Milia, to watch in awe and adoration. Roland waved goodbye to the boy, a flicker of surprise in his eyes at being thanked, despite not having actually killed anything. Roland continued his ordinary job through the days, often approached by many seeking help, or simply to hand off errands or tasks. Ever since Leela had followed him there that one time, she had always found a resting spot beneath a table, staying near him, observing his daily routines. She noticed his consistent role as everyone's errand boy and inquired if he found it at all boring. Roland, however, maintained it was simply part of a normal job, eliciting a sigh and groan of annoyance from Leela, who was growing tired of that very phrase. Suddenly, Roland heard Milia's voice, a troubled murmur about something becoming troublesome. He observed her speaking with 3 adventurers before she walked to the shelf next to him, an exhausted expression on her face. She mumbled about one person still missing, trying to locate something, until Roland caught her attention. He asked if there was a problem, and she explained a party still lacked sufficient members for a C-rank subjugation quest. Milia remembered that the area was near Roland's village, noting a recent increase in monster activity there. The dark-haired male examined the paper more closely as Milia continued, explaining that the requirements might be too dangerous for a solo attempt, hence the party condition. However, the prospective questers still needed one more person to meet the minimum requirement, and it was the final day of the recruitment period before their guild branch would have to defer recruitment to other branches. Milia chuckled brightly at Roland's ability to recall such small details, but a man suddenly called out Roland's name. It was Nil, the archer he had helped earlier. Nil, calling him Big Brother, excitedly asked if he could join them on the trip. Roland felt a mix of confusion and hesitation. Milia agreed it would be much safer if Roland accompanied them, but Roland wasn't sure if it was normal for an employee to join a party on a quest. Milia hummed, then a sudden epiphany struck her. She told them both to give her time to consult with the branch director, immediately running off before Roland could voice an objection, while Nil offered his thanks to her departing form. Iris then walked into the room, casually stating it was no problem for him to join. Still, Roland remained silent, prompting Iris to tease him, asking if he lacked confidence. He denied it, but Iris already knew. She was well aware of his capability to slay a legendary demon on his own. The legendary demon in question, meanwhile, yawned under the table. Iris simply told Roland that his employee status shouldn't hinder him from joining quests, assuring everyone she could count on him without worry. Everyone in the room exclaimed in shock and disbelief at the branch director's evident trust in him. Questions abounded without immediate answers, and assumptions were plentiful. However, none of that mattered to Roland, who decided to accept, as it was a direct order from Iris. Milia, witnessing the exchange, began to pout, a mix of frustration and jealousy swirling within her. The closeness of Roland and Iris's friendship was becoming suspicious, she thought. The group stepped out, and Roland introduced himself. However, the 2 adventurers accompanying Nil, besides Nil himself, regarded Roland with undisguised disappointment, advising him, rather pointedly, not to get in the way. Suddenly, Nil excitedly proclaimed it an honor to fight alongside Roland. Roland, however, gently chided him, asking him to cease calling him Big Bro. Nil promptly switched to Master, which Roland also found unacceptable. They finally set off for their destination. Nil and the others began discussing their past achievements, a conversation that led Roland to realize this party was purely temporary, assembled solely for this mission. He inquired about their ranks, learning the spear wielder and healer were both C rank, while Nil remained D rank. The spear wielder then challenged Roland, asking about his own achievements. Roland simply replied with completely ordinary stuff, prompting the man to scoff and continue on. After a while, they were nearing the village, but Roland, with a sudden urgency, told them to hurry. His words confused the others and angered the healer, who claimed leadership of the party. Roland explained that smoke was rising from the village's direction, but the others assumed it was merely people burning wood. Suddenly, a ferocious roar tore through the air, and a wolf-like creature charged toward them. Roland recognized it, urging everyone to remain calm. He briefly considered dispatching it swiftly, but immediately reminded himself, that's not something a normal employee would do. The dark-haired male began to explain. The creature was a red wolf, known for its high agility and potent offensive capabilities. The healer, believing he had the best strategy, suggested the front line engage it first, allowing the archer a clear shot. Unfortunately, the spear wielder lacked the same eagerness to face the wolf and began to flee as the beast surged forward. Roland, however, quickly grabbed him, delivering a sharp slap to the back of his head, sternly stating he would die with such an attitude. Roland instructed him to lower his spear and keep constant eye contact with the wolf. After some hesitation, the spear wielder finally complied, bracing himself despite his body trembling violently with fear. The sight of the spear caused the red wolf to halt its attack, beginning to circle the spear wielder, its guard up. Roland then called for Nil to unleash a volley of arrows, blinding the creature in one eye and incapacitating it. He then ordered the frontliner to charge forward and stab the wolf in the jaw. At last, the beast fell. The spear wielder collapsed to the ground in tears, looking up at Roland with profound gratitude. Both Nil and this man once again began to call Roland Big Bro. The healer, still somewhat shaken, drew Roland's attention. Roland approached, asking if he would be open to receiving advice when necessary. The shorter male agreed without hesitation this time. They continued their trek. Roland mused on the perplexing presence of the red wolf, whose natural habitat lay much further south. His thoughts, however, were abruptly dismissed as the four men finally stumbled upon the village, now engulfed in flames. The four men frantically rushed into the burning village, immediately aiding in extinguishing the fires as quickly as possible. Roland was dousing nearby flames with a bucket of water when a voice called out to him. It was the spear wielder, also carrying 2 buckets, reporting that the villagers claimed the fire was caused by a lizard-like beast. The dark-haired male immediately recognized the implications. A fire caused by a lizard likely indicated a salamander, a beast he believed their current party was ill-equipped to handle. He instructed them to continue assisting the villagers and douse the flames while he personally confronted the monster. Dropping his buckets, he walked towards the forest, following distinct markings on the ground that led to a specific area. After a while of tracking, Roland finally caught up with the salamander. Startled by his presence, the creature whipped its head around until its gaze fixed on Roland. It opened its jaws, a spark igniting within its mouth, before unleashing a vast plume of fire. Roland met it head-on, slicing through the inferno with a single swing of his arm. The flames dissipated instantly. The salamander, confused and unable to comprehend why its attack failed, attempted its fiery breath once more, but to no avail. It screamed in frustration and anger at Roland's continued existence. Roland calmly explained that all he had to do to counter the flames was move at a sufficient pace. As the lizard charged forward, attacking Roland, he declared it would be punished for what it had done to the village. With a brutal efficiency, he sliced off the salamander's arm, shoved it into the beast's throat, and punched it to the ground. Roland, offering a quiet apology for his method of combat, began dragging the bloody corpse away. Unseen, an unfamiliar man watched from afar, silent. This stranger broke into a cold sweat upon seeing Roland. Who was this man, he wondered, capable of extinguishing a salamander's flame with one hand and killing it in the blink of an eye? The observer theories about Roland's identity, believing he might be from the other side. Yet he also questioned why Roland hadn't directly confronted the red wolf earlier. Suddenly, Roland glanced in the stranger's direction, causing the man to flinch in surprise and attempt to hide, convinced he had been spotted. Roland continued dragging the corpse, and the man gradually calmed, a new idea sparking within him, a decision for later. The village, though still smoky, had largely been saved from the flames thanks to the combined efforts of the villagers and the 4 adventurers. Roland brought the dead salamander back, and the village chief, appalled, asked if Roland was indeed its slayer. Roland introduced himself, explaining he was part of the group dispatched in response to their quest. The chief, introducing himself in turn, thanked Roland and the others for their aid. He was about to mention the other beast, the red wolf, until everyone in the group casually stated they had already dispatched it en route. Roland assured the chief that they could now rest easy. The villagers, grateful, insisted they stay for the night, promising a feast in thanks. Roland walked around, examining the corpses, all seemingly victims of the Red Wolf. The chief explained their constant fear, the lurking monsters. Roland clarified that the Red Wolf was a creature of high intelligence. The chief then recalled other monsters, like orcs, that had plagued the village in the past, driving many to abandon their homes. He sighed, lamenting their fate, their simple desire for an ordinary life. Roland, touched by this sentiment, a determined expression on his face, reassured the chief that no more monsters would attack the village. Night fell, and everyone gathered around a new fire, this one not born of monsters, but of camaraderie. They ate and drank, a scene of unexpected joy. Roland, touched by the moment, remembered others he had met Milia and her family. Yet he had other tasks that night. Nil and the others could be seen drinking, recounting the day's achievements, all attributed to Roland. But as they turned to check on him, he was gone, leaving them confused. Deep in the forest, Roland returned to the very spot where he had fought the salamander. He called out to the person he had sensed earlier. The man emerged, a smirk playing on his lips, chuckling about Roland's normal appearance juxtaposed with his strength and ability to effortlessly fell a salamander and red wolf. He proclaimed himself a rank adventurer and monster tamer, seeking powerful teammates. He admitted to using his monsters to attack villages, drawing adventurers into his snare. Roland, however, seemed displeased by the overconfident man's scheme. Roland accused him of destroying the very sense of normalcy they had worked so hard to achieve that day. The stranger, insisting the villagers died merely because they were weak, laughed at Roland's words. He called Roland annoying, declaring he no longer needed him. Drawing a dagger, he asserted he could still fight without his monsters. Roland, his gaze chilling, declared, "You're talking a lot for a dead man." In an instant, blood bloomed from the man's mouth as he collapsed, seemingly lifeless. Roland walked away, apparently oblivious to the strange wolf-like creatures that approached the body. It was the next day, and everyone had bid farewell to the four men as they departed. Roland wondered how Leela was faring, but his thoughts were interrupted by Nil, who confessed to following Roland the previous day. Nil claimed he hadn't seen or heard anything before asking Roland to accept him as his disciple. Roland immediately refused, shocking Nil, who persisted, articulating his reasons and desires. Roland explained that all he had to teach was basic, but Nil remained undeterred. Roland, not quite acquiescing but not outright refusing, simply urged Nil to hurry as they continued walking. They finally arrived back at the guild, where Milia, excited to see Roland, was shocked to hear about the group's experiences. She marked the quest complete, distributed payment to everyone, and gave Roland a bonus to his salary and a day off. He, however, was astonished by this windfall, having considered the quest a simple errand, eliciting shouts of shock from everyone. Milia also mentioned the branch director wished to speak with him. Roland went to Iris, informing her about the monster tamer he had encountered and his subsequent disappearance. Iris, however, stated there was little they could do. She shifted the topic, offering to treat Roland to dinner at a luxurious restaurant as thanks for his work. He declined, citing other engagements, specifically taking care of a cute cat, and promptly left. Iris felt utterly defeated, seemingly losing out to a feline. Roland made his way home, greeted by an annoyed Leela, who apparently had endured a bad day, having been chased by Milia and coerced into eating cat food. He attempted to mollify her, mentioning the steak and wine he had purchased, as she had requested. But it wasn't enough. She sought details of what had transpired in the village that she hadn't already known. The dark-haired male responded without hesitation, admitting it was his first time killing someone purely by his own will. He vowed to avoid such acts in the future. Leela, observing him, realized his mindset had subtly shifted since embracing his normal life. She placed a hand on his cheek, asserting that a demon king could truly only be understood by another demon king, suggesting she alone truly comprehended him. He pulled her into a hug, confessing he felt a strange, warm sensation whenever she was near, causing her to blush as she admitted the same, hiding her face in embarrassment. Roland, noticing her flushed ears, inquired if she was all right. She merely grew exasperated, telling him to discover the answer for himself. Roland made his way through the city, a bag of groceries in hand, heading home. He passed an alleyway without hesitation, as if he hadn't noticed anything. Yet, something strange tugged at his senses. He turned back, poked his head in, then stepped in, a flicker of confusion on his face. There, he found a small girl, dirty, bruised, and clad in tattered rags, her head bowed low in gloom. He stood for a moment, then knelt, greeting the child. She weakly raised her head, revealing a slave mark imprinted on her neck. Roland noted it, then, with a hum, reached into his grocery bag, offering her a potato. She weakly reached for the vegetable, biting into it. Once finished, she leaned against the building once more. Roland knew this child would not survive if he didn't intervene. And so he did, picking her up and carrying her home. He was greeted by Leela, apron-clad, who welcomed him, declaring her sauce for the evening the best she'd ever made. She then glanced into his grocery bag, ensuring he hadn't forgotten bread for dinner. It was then Leela noticed the girl on Roland's back. "What's with the kid?" she asked as Roland entered the house, simply explaining he would care for her for a while. "Why bother?" she retorted. "No one asked you to." But he assured her it was no trouble, they had an extra room. Leela sighed, telling him he could do as he pleased, adding the bath was ready, though she was too busy with dinner to assist him with the child. After a short bath, the girl, clearly relaxed, had fallen asleep. Roland then asked Leela if there was a method to remove a slave insignia. Leela affirmed its possibility, but expressed her own limitations, having lost her magic. The woman realized Roland's prolonged gaze upon the girl, prompting her to tease him about his kindness, a stark contrast to his past as an assassin. Returning to the topic, Leela explained a slave insignia was a contract, only removable by its caster. Roland, however, already knew this, adding that it applied only to human knowledge. Leela examined the girl more closely, wondering why anyone would enslave her, given her seemingly low market value. Roland agreed. Leela continued, explaining that humans used various slave contracts, this girl's being a common one. The devil's contract, an exchange of one's soul for extraordinary magic power. But there was an alteration, subordination, and an inability to lie. She offered to teach Roland the spell, cautioning that improper learning would render it ineffective, and even then, failure remained a possibility. Still, he desired to learn it. Leela indulged in a brief moment of narcissism, declaring he should be grateful a demon lord like her would personally instruct him. Roland quickly corrected her, urging her to hurry it up. After a period of instruction, Roland felt he had a chance at breaking the seal. As he walked toward the child, Leela suddenly remembered one last crucial detail and was about to explain it. But Roland, with a casual ease, cast the spell on his first attempt, successfully obliterating the slave insignia on the girl's neck within seconds. Leela stood agape, utterly shocked that he had cast a 5th-rank magic spell on his first try, and without even a magic circle. His magical prowess, she realized, was on par with her own. Roland, however, asked about the 5th-rank magic spell, prompting Leela to explain the demon ranking system, where higher ranks signified stronger magic, and she herself held the unique position of 1st rank. She then conceded that Roland possessed a natural aptitude for magic. Roland, feeling he had merely followed her instructions, downplayed his achievement. Leela, however, insisted he shouldn't be humble. His magic was already on par with the demons. Later that day, during dinner, the small girl had finally awakened. Startled by Roland's presence, he asked if she had slept well. He introduced himself, offering her some soup Leela had made, cautioning that while he couldn't guarantee the taste, it was better than nothing. Leela entered, an upset expression on her face, feeling insulted by his comment. The small child began to eat the soup but remained silent. Roland, humming thoughtfully, leaned his head close to Leela. She, confused, momentarily believed he was attempting to kiss her in front of the girl, flushing, though she didn't resist. It was a misunderstanding. Roland placed his hand on her collar, transforming her back into her cat form. Leela cried out in confusion and anger until the girl finally spoke, excitement lacing her wide eyes. Roland picked up the cat, telling the girl to care for it, while the cat vociferously complained about the situation, yelling at Roland to change her back and for the child to release her. The girl asked if caring for the cat was an order from her master, but Roland clarified he was not her master and was not forcing her. He then informed them both he was leaving for work and that if she needed anything, she could ask the cat. Roland went to work at the guild, perusing the members list. He noticed that the race, gender, and age of adventurers were not registered. Milia, observing him, inquired about his activity. He explained he simply wished to confirm something. A meow interrupted them, coming from outside the building. Roland opened a window, asking the girl what she was doing there before eventually letting her into the guild. Everyone stared and whispered, impressed by Roland's dependability in caring for the girl. He apologized for her presence, but Milia assured him it was fine, suggesting they seek permission from the branch director. Morley, however, entered, emphatically stating that the guild was no nursery, a point Roland conceded as fair. Morley began to complain about his aversion to children, finding them loud and annoying. But Iris, entering amidst the commotion, quickly grasped the situation. She immediately granted permission for Roland to keep the girl there, provided she caused no trouble. Morley, confused and frustrated, questioned Iris's latitude with Roland, complaining that Roland always left early and didn't take work seriously. Iris countered that this was only because he consistently completed his tasks, earning the privilege of early departure. Consequently, Iris merely instructed Roland to keep the girl in the reception office. He told the child to behave, promising to check on her periodically. The girl smiled brightly when Roland gently patted her head. Once work concluded, the girl was brought back to Roland and Leela's house. They had named her Melly, an ancient demon word meaning blue sky, as she couldn't recall her own name. The girl seemed delighted with the name, jumping with joy. Leela asked Roland about his plans for her. He responded that he intended to make her an adventurer. He also wished to find someone who could teach her how to be normal. Leela was about to offer her services, but Roland, contemplating aloud, suggested he could ask Milia for help, causing Leela to huff and walk away. Eventually, Roland informed Melly about their daily training sessions, which would extend until morning. Their initial sessions consisted solely of running, a task the girl initially struggled with. Though she would tire quickly, with time, Melly would build her stamina, growing accustomed to the rigorous routine. Roland asked the girl if she remembered her time as a slave, but Melly still retained no memory of her past. Leela called them in for dinner, though she was clearly in a foul mood. She glared at Roland, asserting she was not a housekeeper. He reassured her he never thought of her as one. Leela then admitted she simply desired more attention from Roland, feeling he was dedicating all his focus to the girl. Roland, however, couldn't quite grasp her meaning, asking if she wished for him to train her as well, eliciting a whine of complaint from the girl. Night fell, and everyone seemed to be asleep except Roland, who immediately sensed an unfamiliar presence outside the house. He went out to investigate but was puzzled. Who could be the assassin's target? It was highly improbable anyone knew Leela's true identity, leaving only one conclusion: the assassin was here for the girl. As the days passed, Roland continued to train Melly. She would wield a branch, attempting to strike the dark-haired man, who dodged every attack with effortless grace. Even without a single hit landing, he praised her, assuring her she was doing well, and all that remained was to gain some real experience. Melly inquired if the moves had names. Roland replied it wasn't necessary, but she was free to name them if she wished. Leela then announced it was lunchtime, giving Melly an opportunity to strike. She yelled out one of her attacks, but the very act of shouting it allowed Roland to block her with ease, causing her to pout and throw the branch in frustration. The girl ran to Leela for comfort, but Leela agreed with Roland, stating it was not a game, and he wouldn't lose to mere children, upsetting Melly once more. A few days had passed since the assassin incident, with no further activity. Roland, however, didn't believe it was truly over. As they ate, Leela questioned why he was teaching Melly assassin moves rather than swordsmanship or martial arts, if he intended for her to be an adventurer. He admitted he didn't want her to adopt the naive thinking of other adventurers, who believed failure simply meant a next time. Leela praised the girl's significant improvement since she last observed her training. Melly, in turn, attributed her progress entirely to Roland's help and advice. Leela hummed thoughtfully, then inquired if the girl was now competent enough to be an adventurer. Roland asked Melly, who responded without hesitation. They went to the guild, and Milia, surprised to see Roland on his day off, asked why he was there. He explained he was there to register Melly as an adventurer despite her young age. Milia went to retrieve the form for the girl, then explained the test would involve a magic power measurement and a practical assessment. The practical test, she noted, would be first, and unfortunately, it would be examined by Morley. This was a disappointment for many reasons, not least because it meant dealing with Morley himself. They walked toward the battle area, where Morley, with a confident smirk, declared it his job to teach children to abandon their dreams. Everyone, however, was already prepared to laugh at him. Roland handed the girl a sheathed dagger for the fight. He instructed her to replicate their training techniques. Melly and Morley stood opposite each other, ready for battle. Milia signaled the start of the test. Morley immediately charged forward, unleashing a heavy swing with his wooden sword, proclaiming victory belonged to whoever made the first move. Melly, with effortless agility, swiftly dodged his attack and struck Morley in the rear. She repeated this numerous times until Morley eventually begged the child to stop. This meant she had passed the practical test, despite still having room for growth in her magic, given her youth. In the end, she passed the adventurer's test completely. The three planned a celebratory feast. Leela tended to Melly's appearance at home, an action that seemed to stir a fleeting memory within the girl's mind. She dismissed it for now. The girl then rushed into the guild, begging Roland for a quest. He patiently explained, once again, that there were no F-rank combat quests available, so she would have to undertake simpler ones for the time being. Suddenly, knights burst through the door, attempting to seize Melly. Both Leela and Roland refused to surrender the girl, prompting the knights to prepare for violence. Roland stepped out with a sigh, delivering a swift punch to one knight's face, sending him sprawling. Everyone in the building stared, a collective judgment in their eyes. The man the knights served, Badel, the feudal lord, then entered, demanding the girl, referring to her by a different name. Leela refused, and Badel, captivated by her beauty, attempted to persuade Leela to accompany him as well. She slapped the old man away, asserting Roland was the only man permitted to touch her. Badel didn't seem to recognize Roland until Roland removed his glasses, inquiring about his brother's well-being. Roland then offered Badel forgiveness and silence regarding the feudal lord's unscrupulous tactics in securing the throne, should he turn back now. Badel's demeanor shifted instantly. He began to apologize for his actions and those of his knights. Roland, satisfied, still pressed for all the information Badel possessed about the girl. After gleaning what he could, Badel was eventually permitted to leave. Roland knew interfering further with nobles was not a normal thing to do. He bid farewell to Badel and the knights. Roland walked back into the guild, all eyes on him, everyone wondering who he was to command such deference from a feudal lord. He reassured Melly that all would be well, prompting another fleeting memory in the girl, which she again dismissed before declaring she would take the quest he had picked. Night came, and Melly was already asleep. Roland quickly informed Leela that Melly was, in fact, a princess from the fallen Baden-Hark kingdom and seemed to have lost her memories. Leela didn't appear happy to hear this. Roland opened his arms, offering a hug as she inquired if anyone was waiting for Melly. Roland admitted he didn't know, suggesting he might have to consult King Randolph about it later. Melly lay in bed, her thoughts turning to the return of her memories, replaying her interactions with Roland and Leela, and countless other moments since her enslavement. She remembered a grand mansion as her home, kind parents, and 3 siblings. But then, something had happened, and all of it had been taken from her. After that, nothing made sense. Everything had faded into darkness. At least, until she met Roland in that alleyway. Back in the present, Melly rose from her bed and walked to Roland and Leela's bedroom, asking if she could sleep with them for the night. She climbed into bed, hugging the dark-haired man. Leela, popping her head out from under the covers with a frustrated pout, realized Melly's presence had ruined her plans for intimacy with Roland, and now, with his impending departure, she wouldn't get another chance. Melly noticed Leela was unclothed and asked if she wasn't cold. Leela replied it was fine, being in bed, and told the girl to lie between them, giving Roland some space. The girl asked where Roland was going. He explained he would be gone for 2 days for work stuff, and Melly would stay with Leela. This news caused the girl to hug Roland with a sad expression. Leela joined in, embracing both of them, and they all slept in a warm embrace. The next day, Melly informed Leela she was heading to the guild and would catch up later. Leela, meanwhile, continued her household chores, pondering Roland's activities. Roland, in fact, was in King Randolph's bedroom, attempting to rouse the old man with a slap, a method that worked but also greatly startled him. Randolph had to be reassured he wasn't being killed before Roland explained he needed a favor, one difficult to accomplish without Randolph's assistance. The matter concerned the Princess of Baden-Hark. Roland wished to know if any survivors of the kingdom remained. King Randolph confirmed Melly's mother was alive, though official information about the rest of the family was scarce. With this knowledge, Roland asked Randolph to inform Melly's mother of the situation, then promptly departed for home. He returned before Melly was back from the guild. Leela informed Roland that everyone was speaking highly of the girl, hailing her as a promising newcomer. Their conversation was interrupted by Roland's revelation. Melly's mother was alive and would be collecting her daughter in 2 days. Leela's gaze shifted away, a sad smile playing on her lips. Roland, noticing the change, remained silent. Leela attempted to project positivity, asserting there was no reason to be sad, as Melly would be reunited with her family. Given they had only 2 days left with the girl, they resolved to make them the greatest Melly had ever experienced, creating as many new memories as possible before that inevitable day arrived. Leela once again meticulously styled Melly's appearance. A carriage pulled up, and they all walked out, hand in hand, toward Melly's mother, or rather, Ali's mother. All of Melly's forgotten memories seemed to flood back as the two warmly embraced, tears flowing freely. Her mother thanked Roland and Leela for their care, declaring she would never forget this debt. She then told her daughter to take her time in bidding farewell to the two. Melly approached Roland and Leela, telling them she was glad to have met them and learned so much. Leela assured the girl this was not a final farewell, and she was always welcome to visit. The girl agreed, promising to write letters, but then added almost as an afterthought that she would one day be Roland's wife. Roland merely responded, "I understand," leaving Leela confused and jealous of his answer. With one last tearful smile, the girl reiterated her happiness at having met them before departing with her mother. Roland and Leela shared the same sentiment. Roland once again visited King Randolph, rousing him with another slap. The old man shrieked, jumping awake, his wide eyes staring at the dark-haired male in shock. He was bewildered by Roland's continued presence, wondering if Roland truly intended to kill him this time. Roland quickly corrected him, explaining he was there to thank Randolph for his assistance the other day and to repay a debt. The king attempted to wave it off, insisting it was unnecessary, given Roland's past help as an assassin. Roland, however, insisted on repayment, stating this debt was unrelated to his past. He owed the king a favor as a normal person. Randolph hummed thoughtfully for a moment, then an idea struck him, something for Roland to do to settle the score. It concerned his daughter, the first princess and hero, Aliria. Roland inquired if something was amiss with the girl. Indeed, there was. After defeating and subjugating the Demon King, she had been feeling despondent. Her personal maid had learned that Aliria was downcast because her beloved had suddenly vanished, despite a supposed promise to love each other after the subjugation. Roland nodded, seemingly grasping the situation, and asked if he merely needed to find this person. Randolph, annoyed by Roland's apparent denseness, clarified that Aliria was speaking about Roland himself, then simply told him to cheer the girl up. Roland made his way back to the city, pondering his course of action. Even if it had been said, Roland had no memory of making such a promise to Illyria. Furthermore, dating royalty was hardly a normal pursuit, yet he had to repay his debt. Upon his arrival home, he explained the entire situation to Leela, who remembered Illyria, then proceeded to call Roland troublesome for the predicaments he invariably found himself in. Roland, despite Illyria's perspective, still had no recollection of making such a promise to the girl. From Illyria's point of view, it seemed Roland had vanished, leaving her feeling dejected ever since. Leela, however, already had a solution in mind. She suggested Roland simply make Illyria believe he had died. For grief over a departed loved one, time would eventually heal the wound, she reasoned, far better than enduring endless despair over a person's unknown whereabouts. Roland's eyes widened. The idea was brilliant. He asked Leela if she had any specific plans. Leela revealed a 7th-rank illusion magic called Real Nightmare, piquing Roland's interest. He rose from his chair. She asked if he wished to learn it, and he confirmed without hesitation, observing as Leela proceeded to teach him the magic. As expected, he mastered it with astonishing speed, which in turn somewhat wounded Leela's pride as a demon lord. While she was distracted, Roland raised his hand, holding it near Leela's face, testing the Real Nightmare magic. He made her believe she was a dog and he her owner. Suddenly, Leela was an entirely different person, charging at Roland, barking happily, attempting to tackle him. He swiftly dodged, which only made her pout. He realized it was not merely an illusion but a combination of illusion and hypnosis. Roland's thoughts, however, were interrupted when Leela began to lick and kiss his face like a dog, barking contentedly. He decided it was time to revert her. With a simple clap of his hands, she snapped out of the trance, realizing what she had done. Flustered, she began to complain loudly about his actions. Roland turned, preparing to leave the palace again, stating he had no time for small talk. This offended Leela, who believed he meant her words were worthless. Roland, however, simply silenced her with a kiss, promising her a reward if she behaved in his absence. She urged him not to be gone too long as he departed the house. It was another normal day at Roland's normal job. The guild bustled with adventurers, all seeking quests, creating a mountain of work for the employees. Leela was there, in her cat form, batting playfully at papers. Milia approached Roland, handing him more documents to process, which he accepted without hesitation. As he took the papers, Milia leaned in slightly, a concerned look on her face. She had noticed him seeming distracted lately. She asked if it was because Melly had gone home, causing both Roland and Leela's eyes to widen in shock at the question. He pondered for a moment, unsure how to explain it, yet confessed to a strange hole in his heart. Milia identified the feeling as loneliness. The girl chuckled, expressing how touching it was to see his care for his relatives. She instructed him to continue with the documents as she began to walk away. However, someone suddenly burst through the guild's front doors, startling Milia, who wondered who it could be. Roland, meanwhile, felt a premonition of trouble. The door slammed open as a confident figure strode into the building. Roland's head snapped up, his eyes widening at the sight of a familiar person standing in the middle of the guild, her expression determined and fulfilled. It was Illyria, clad in her familiar armor, apologizing for the commotion. Everyone else in the building was either surprised and excited to see the princess and hero, or simply confused, assuming she was just another adventurer. Illyria approached the front desk, informing Milia that she was at the guild because she heard there was a staff member named Roland. Milia struggled to answer Illyria as Roland held papers to the side of his face, attempting to obscure himself from Illyria's view. Unfortunately, Illyria took a closer look and immediately recognized Roland, even as he attempted to claim she had the wrong person. She easily saw through his flimsy disguise of mere glasses. Roland remained silent for a moment, still holding the paper over his mouth, before asking Illyria her business. She declared she was there to become an adventurer. He immediately informed her they were no longer accepting applications, causing Illyria to grow confused and upset, believing everyone should be able to become an adventurer. She tried to turn to Milia for help, only further overwhelming the girl. As this unfolded, Roland wondered why Illyria was there, a troubling thought occurring to him. Had his spell failed? When Roland had gone to the palace, Illyria was in her bed, crying, her face buried in pillows and sheets, sniffling. She heard a sound and spun around, asking who it was, until she saw Roland emerge from behind her bedroom's opaque curtains. Her tears paused for a moment as she stared in confusion and shock, recognizing him. The dark-haired male walked up to her and used real nightmare on the girl. He told her he had died after the battle with the demon lord, bleeding out from a wound on his way back. Roland took a step back, observing the spell's effects. He saw the girl begin to tear up again, crying in confusion, whether speaking directly to him or to herself. Illyria confessed her love for him, reminding him of his promise to stay by her side, to kiss her after the battle was over. She continued to chant that he had promised her. Roland seemed to recall making such a promise and decided he would keep it. He gave Illyria a sweet, brief kiss before swiftly departing, praying for her well-being. Yet, it seemed that would not be his last encounter with her. Roland wondered if someone had lifted the spell, a troubled expression on his face regarding the situation. Meanwhile, Illyria was begging Milia to hurry and give her an adventurer application, but Roland refused, citing her status as a princess and hero, telling her it wasn't time to play around. The girl pouted, insisting it was fine, wondering about his attitude after what he had done to her. All the other employees were confused, gossiping about Illyria and Roland's apparent acquaintance, wondering about Roland's true identity. Illyria's expression shifted to a happier one as she wondered if Roland was embarrassed. Roland, however, insisted he had no idea what she was talking about and asked if she had informed her father of her visit. This only upset the night girl again. She didn't want to involve her father. Everyone else in the guild speculated if the two were actually together. Illyria grumbled, complaining that she should be allowed to be an adventurer. She also wondered aloud why Roland wore glasses, before growing shy again and remarking that they looked good on him. She then ordered him to instruct his superiors to make her an adventurer, a demand he refused. However, another employee approached Roland, advising him it would likely be best to comply, lest their own positions be jeopardized. With some reluctance, Roland listened and accompanied Illyria to see the branch director, Iris. Illyria confidently declared her desire to become an adventurer, asking if it was acceptable. Iris affirmed it was fine and was about to say something else, but Illyria interrupted her. The night girl asked for Iris's name, promising to remember it. Roland, interjecting with a stern glare, told Illyria to stop speaking to his boss with such arrogance. Illyria apologized, becoming meek as she introduced herself to Iris, then informed Roland that his boss had agreed. Roland sighed, then stated Illyria would be tested on her abilities, with Roland as the examiner. This meant she would have to fight him. Illyria declared it impossible, certain she couldn't win against Roland, yet still expressed no desire to join another guild. Roland asked why she was so fixated on this specific guild. She finally admitted it was all an excuse to see him. They eventually moved to the city streets, preparing for battle. Illyria and Roland stood opposite each other, the girl drawing her blade, announcing she would fight seriously to earn his acknowledgement. Roland urged her to do her best, wondering if she possessed the resolve to stand before him. He began to glare, emitting a palpable, heavy aura that Illyria immediately felt. She instinctively recoiled, her sword raised defensively. Leela, observing, noted Illyria's keen sense of danger, though it was unfortunate that the sheer pressure of Roland's killing intent alone was enough to paralyze her. Illyria, sweating, continuously retreated from the approaching man. Roland intensified his glare, causing the girl to collapse to the floor in fear, effectively ending the battle. She panted heavily, in disbelief, having believed she had grown stronger, disappointed she could only endure his killing intent for 5 seconds. Roland, however, praised her, affirming he did believe she had improved. Roland recounted that in the past, she would faint when struck by his killing intent and would wet herself during such occurrences. Illyria, flustered, insisted it was merely sweat. Regardless, Roland declared his victory and deemed her unqualified. Illyria groaned in frustration, complaining to him before running away, proclaiming she would return. He sighed, telling her to do as she pleased, a response that seemingly made her smile as she rode away on her horse. The crowd was abuzz, then everyone resumed their day. Roland apologized for the trouble. Milia inquired about his relationship with the princess. He answered honestly that they had once traveled together on their quest to defeat the demon lord. The girl, however, took this as a joke and laughed. Roland then decided to simply say he had been Illyria's tutor, a seemingly plausible explanation for Milia, and also a reason for him wearing glasses. She walked away with a confident expression, and all the other employees also believed his words, leaving Roland with an unexpected, strange new title. It was another day with Roland at his job, and an employee approached him, stating he could take over the front desk as he was adept at managing people's squabbles. Roland called for the next person. A young boy timidly approached, requesting a quest, then sought confirmation of Roland's identity. This adventurer explained that Nil and other adventurers had spoken highly of Roland, claiming any quest he recommended would never go awry. Roland, however, advised him not to believe everything he heard. The boy then asked Roland to assign him a quest suited to his abilities. The dark-haired male walked off, returning with a simple F-rank quest. The boy examined it, believing he could handle it, yet couldn't shake a worry, as he couldn't afford to get injured. Roland reassured him, stating it was normal to worry about such things. Eventually, a girl approached the desk, requesting a difficult quest. Roland found one, a mission with 2 already applied F-rank adventurers, with room for 1 more to meet the quest requirements. He presented it to the girl, Everly, who accepted without hesitation. Roland then went to process it and gather the remaining party members. By afternoon, the group had assembled: Atro, a spear user, Uno, a sword user, and Everly, the girl from earlier. They all exchanged worried glances, confiding in Roland that they didn't believe they were strong enough to clear the quest. Hearing this, Roland instructed them to go somewhere else and left the front desk to Milia for a while. Everyone walked outside. He explained he would train the group for a bit, as they had all applied for quests far too difficult for them. They grew upset and offended, arguing they could manage somehow if they worked together. Roland, in response, summoned several small shadow entities. These entities proceeded to beat up the 2 men and pilfer the girls' underwear. Roland laughed, calling them insects, remarking they were even weaker than the shadows he had intentionally made weak. The girl cried out that her skirt had been flipped. Roland countered that she should be grateful that was all that happened, as women often endured far worse when dealing with nefarious individuals. They needed to understand their capabilities and limitations, Roland insisted. He made them declare they were weaker than insects, a humbling exercise intended to foster self-awareness that would eventually translate into strength. From that moment, their training would begin, battling the shadows. Each member would slowly learn tips tailored to their abilities, fighting the shadows, growing stronger, until eventually they were ready for the quest they had applied for. They seemed like changed individuals as the quest's requester asked the group to protect him, to which they confidently promised their best. Back at the guild, Roland returned to the front desk, observing someone begging a worker for another chance, desperate to become an adventurer. The worker, stating the guild was about to close, told him to leave. The man apologized, complying. Milia explained to Roland that the boy had been asking about the same thing since the previous day, but guild rules mandated a 6-month waiting period before reapplying. She also noted the boy's skill was odd, and he didn't seem to know how to use it. Milia then sought to change the subject, asking if Roland was free for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, he declined, citing other engagements. These engagements, it turned out, involved leaving the guild to check on the boy. The boy explained his need to become an adventurer to help his mother, but lamented his lack of strength, despite it being his dream after witnessing Illyria fight. Roland asked the boy to demonstrate his skill. The boy revealed Penetrate, a sword technique that extended the reach of his attacks. Roland pondered for a moment, then suggested the boy apply the same skill to a shovel. Upon doing so, the boy felt ashamed, realizing his skill seemed only useful for digging. Roland, however, explained its significance and utility, particularly for creating safety zones, reigniting the boy's confidence. Roland then advised him he could simply take the test at another guild. Roland had originally intended to teach the boy how to handle a spear, but seeing him run off happily, knew this was enough for now. Later, another adventurer rudely sat on the desk, demanding a good quest. Roland suggested collecting herbs or carrying luggage. The man grew angry, yelling at Roland, until Nil entered and smacked the man, ordering him not to bother Roland or sit on the counter. Nil apologized to Roland for the man's behavior. The man then recognized Roland as the individual Nil constantly praised, switching to an adoring demeanor. This, however, only angered Nil again, who attempted to discipline the man, forcing another blow. Nil asked Roland to tell them about the quest. The dark-haired male sighed, finding the situation rather troublesome. Roland continued to assist adventurers at the desk, drawing praise from Milia. Morley, however, interjected, dismissing it as not that big of a deal. Milia retorted that it was, in fact, a very big deal, given Roland had been working for a shorter time yet proved to be an excellent employee. Morley attempted to claim greater popularity, but Milia knew he was only popular with those he was already close with, leading to both glaring at each other and snapping to just get their work done. Another employee then suggested Roland take a break. He walked off, only to stumble upon a shadow, which informed him that the training he had given the earlier group had been successful. Iris approached him, eager to hear what had transpired with Illyria and Badal. Roland recounted everything honestly, much to Iris's disappointment. She couldn't reprimand him. She called him an ally of justice before imparting one final piece of information. A group of adventurers had recently shown remarkable improvement. Roland simply stated he had offered them advice to prevent any disasters. Iris hummed, pondering his response, then commented that he was helping novices become outstanding adventurers. Iris, once again, attempted to invite Roland to dinner. However, he swiftly declined, citing his need to care for a cat. Iris, undeterred, insisted it was a matter of work. He countered that work matters could be discussed at work. But before he could leave, she shouted, revealing an offer. She wanted him to become a full-time examiner for the adventurer's test, an offer that piqued his interest. Roland was making his way through the city, clad in his work uniform as always, until he stumbled upon Milia. She, noticing him, ran up, panting, trying to catch her breath, attributing it to his fast walking. He, however, was more focused on why she was there, asking if she needed anything. Milia looked up with a bright smile, holding up a bag from which she produced a wrapped bottle. She wanted to celebrate his promotion to a full-time test examiner, she declared. Roland was about to say he was busy until Milia asserted that happy events called for celebration, as it was the normal thing to do. The dark-haired male paused, his demeanor immediately shifting. He agreed to Milia's offer, causing the girl to jump with joy. Yet, she sweat dropped, realizing Roland would agree to anything if framed as normal. They walked through the city together, conversing. Milia mentioned that all the staff were surprised by the news, given Roland had only been working at the guild for 2 months. She, however, expressed her excitement at seeing him become the guild's first full-time test examiner, especially since everyone had agreed well, almost everyone. Roland remembered one person who definitely wouldn't agree, but Milia told him to disregard Morley, as disagreeing after the branch director's positive reports about Roland would be strange. Milia was also touched by Roland's concern for the young boy from earlier, and she sensed a change in the adventurer's attitudes toward quests. Nil, in particular, had transformed significantly, quickly rising to C rank after a long time as an F rank. Roland tried to insist the adventurer's changes were solely due to their own efforts, having nothing to do with him. Milia, however, countered that Iris held a different view, adding that Roland's sincerity resonated deeply with people. The man stared blankly as Milia tried to convince him there was something special about him. He asked why she seemed so happy, as if she was the one being praised. She laughed, explaining that was indeed the case. As his superior, his praise reflected positively on her. As they continued walking, Roland asked what Milia meant by everyone when discussing the celebration. She explained that the branch manager would also be attending, and they would celebrate at his house. Without a moment's doubt, Roland assumed it was perfectly normal to celebrate at the honoree's home. As they approached the house, they saw Iris standing awkwardly outside, dressed in a fancy gown, holding a wrapped bottle, fidgeting in anticipation. She noticed them and greeted them, handing the bottle to Roland. Milia, however, was more focused on Iris's unexpectedly elaborate attire. Iris insisted it was normal for her, a claim Roland believed, even as Milia observed that Iris was clearly putting in her best effort. Due to the commotion, Leela stepped outside, greeting Roland happily, noting his rare presence with guests. Milia returned the greeting, and Iris introduced herself as the guild's branch director. Leela, however, already knew who she was, surprising Iris. Leela turned to Roland, casually asking if the two women were there to collectively have fun with him, causing Iris and Milia to flinch in shock and confusion. Roland quickly clarified no and placed the wrapped bottles down. The sight of the bottles made Leela realize they were preparing a banquet, and she confidently laughed. Milia then asked to borrow the kitchen and an apron, surprising Leela, who teased her for her bravery in wanting to set foot in her castle. Milia groaned, simply asking Leela what she could and couldn't use. The two women walked off to the kitchen as Iris watched, remarking that they seemed to get along well. Meanwhile, Roland and Iris set up the table, waiting for the food. Milia opened a pot, her expression surprised, asking the demon girl what was inside before tasting it. Milia groaned in annoyance at its exquisite flavor, yet still tried to find fault, claiming something was wrong and it needed improvement. The two women began to argue, with Milia attempting to push Leela away, telling her to go away for a while. Leela pouted in frustration, then glanced over at Roland and Iris, approaching to hug Roland's arm while introducing herself to the branch director. They decided to begin the celebration early, as Milia's cooking would take some time. The three sat at the table. Iris inquired about Leela's relationship with Roland, curious after hearing they had met during his journey. Leela casually replied she was like a to the man, causing Iris to gasp in shock. Leela assured Iris there was no need to panic, claiming to understand that women sought out strong individuals. She declared that as long as Roland eventually returned to her, she would be satisfied. Roland asked if she had perhaps had too much to drink, prompting an embarrassed laugh from Leela. Iris hummed, finally understanding why Roland had refused her dinner invitation. Milia finally finished preparing dinner, asking Leela what she had been boasting about while she was gone. Leela simply told Milia to bow down to her. Milia groaned again, turning to Roland, trying to convince him her cooking was superior and he should choose her over Leela. After being essentially rejected again, Milia growled and chugged a glass of the drinks she had brought. Leela, in turn, informed the girl she was not the star that day. The celebratory banquet continued, with everyone enjoying the delicious food and drinks, until Milia and Leela, thoroughly stuffed, passed out in bed. Roland and Iris were the only ones still awake. Iris asked if Roland could continue, but he didn't answer, simply walking up to her and placing a hand over her drink. They stared into each other's eyes in silence. Iris eventually leaned in for a kiss, then quickly pulled away just before their lips connected, realizing Roland was not opposed. She called him a bad man. Roland didn't disagree, admitting he had done a bad job in the past. Iris then asked if he was also skilled at winning women's hearts. Roland confirmed he could be, if necessary. Iris then proceeded to crawl onto the dark-haired male. The next day, after everyone had departed, Roland was preparing for work and noticed Leela seemed to be unwell. He had already prepared a meal, instructing her to eat it when she felt able. Leela attempted to speak, to explain what might have caused her condition, but quickly dismissed it, merely asking for a kiss. Roland, without hesitation, kissed her before leaving for work. Milia, learning of Leela's illness, was surprised she could even get sick. She wondered if it was appropriate for Roland to work, perplexing him, until she asked if he had taken Leela to a doctor. Roland admitted he hadn't, prompting Milia to advise him to leave early. People, she explained, become vulnerable when sick and more lonely. Milia confessed she would whine for a year if no one cared for her when ill. She then departed to relay the message to the branch director, adding she would make dinner after work while Roland took Leela to the doctor and provided comfort. The dark-haired male swiftly left, walking through the city, wondering what to do. He doubted a human doctor could examine a demon. But as he approached his house, he saw the door ajar. Suspicion pricked him. He entered the silent house, on guard, slowly making his way to the bedroom, only to find Leela gone. Her original clothes lay on the bed, but the dress she often wore was missing, indicating a recent change. Roland felt the bed. It was still warm, meaning Leela couldn't be far. It was unlikely she had gone grocery shopping, as he would have encountered her on his return. He noticed remnants of magic power on the bed, making him wonder if survivors of the Demon Lord's army had finally realized she was alive, or if Leela had regained her power. He decided the former was more likely, as he would have sensed a powerful force like Leela's instantly, implying she was still wearing the collar. The magic energy seemed to emanate southward, and Roland, removing his glasses, followed it, noting it was leading either to the Badhar Kingdom or the Jorovensen Kingdom. It traversed the city and into a dense forest, stopping in a specific area. Roland looked up, taking a moment to sense the source, quickly locating it. Roland walked to the spot he had sensed and called out for the person to emerge. A dark elf woman stepped out, a smirk on her face, stating she wondered who had been following her, only to discover it was a human. Roland was unalarmed by her species, simply sighing, confirming it was just a dark elf, which offended the woman. He told the dark elf that Leela better be okay, and that she should return her. The dark elf, however, seemed reluctant to speak, yet she thanked him for hiding Leela. Roland casually replied it was no problem, further irritating the dark elf, who then attempted to attack him. He swiftly dodged all her strikes, advising her to watch her back, prompting her to laugh, asserting she wouldn't be fooled by such a human tactic. But it was true, something was behind her. Roland had summoned small shadow entities to attack the woman. She was shocked and confused. How could a human use fourth-rank magic? He explained Leela had taught him and called the dark elf worse than a human, enraging her further. Roland then summoned many more shadows. The dark elf stated the maximum should be 6 and wondered if the shadows possessed self-consciousness, given their movements. Roland simply replied he was controlling all of them. The woman slammed her blade into the ground in anger, causing the shadows to scatter in fear. But she failed to see Roland walk up to her and simply flick her forehead, sending her flying into a tree. Roland looked over and found Leela. The dark elf woman was about to awaken, so Roland decided to use some magic on her to prevent her interference. After doing so, Roland walked over to Leela and dispelled the magic that held her. She slowly awakened, confused, asking why Roland was there. She explained her subordinate had requested a favor, saying it would be faster if she explained, wondering where the girl, Rosie, had gone, as she was supposedly carrying her while under the sleep magic. Roland called Rosie over. Leela noticed the dark elf woman was under the real nightmare magic and behaving like a dog. Leela found it amusing, but Rosie was still her subordinate, and she wanted Roland to lift the magic, which he did. Rosie was confused about why she had been acting like a dog. Roland asked if she had any fun, but Rosie grew upset by his words again and drew her weapons until Leela told her to stop, stating she would not allow anyone to lay a hand on her spouse. The dark elf woman was confused, unfamiliar with the term spouse. Leela clarified that she should not treat the man lightly. Leela admitted she couldn't last 30 minutes against him and had surrendered after only 10, shocking Rosie, who noted the shortening timeframe. Suddenly, Roland interjected, stating Leela hadn't even lasted 5 minutes on their first night, causing Leela to become flustered and lightly smack him, telling him not to mention that in front of her subordinate. Leela explained to Rosie that she had acknowledged Roland and vowed to devote herself to him. Rosie, however, still didn't feel she could acknowledge Roland herself. Returning to the main topic, Roland asked Rosie why she had attempted to take Leela away. With a nod from Leela, Rosie began to explain. Rosie had discovered Leela's corpse and immediately recognized it as a fake, lacking a birthmark on her rear. Leela chuckled, stating she had no such mark, but both Rosie and even Roland confirmed that, yes, she did. Rosie continued. After months had passed, some of the demon army suggested attacking humans again to avenge the demon lord's loss. Rosie wanted to inform everyone that Leela was actually alive, hoping to undermine the radicals' cause, as Rosie herself believed retreating was a wise decision. The current individual poised to lead the invasion was named Cornelio Vril, a name Leela seemed to recognize. Humans might have believed the war was over, but for demons, it was far from it. Originally, demons inhabited a separate continent called Makai, but one day, they invaded human lands using transfer magic. The demons relentlessly sought to seize as much territory as possible, until the Seven Kings formed a coalition force to repel the main armies, while a special heroes party infiltrated the castle to defeat the demon lord. However, many demons still lurked around the castle's perimeter, necessitating a continued guard by a portion of the coalition force. Roland cautioned Leela that she might not be able to stop them, a fact she acknowledged, yet still clung to the belief that they would heed her words as the demon lord. She declared that the war started by demons was a mistake and wished to atone for her sins as her final responsibility as the demon lord. Roland, in turn, vowed to do everything he could to assist her. Leela grew confused. She didn't want humans to know he hadn't killed her. Roland insisted he had indeed killed the demon lord, but he wouldn't allow anyone to kill Leela without dealing with him first. The demon girl, tears welling, hugged Roland as Rosie, touched by the scene, watched. The three then walked through the forest toward a gate Rosie had installed near a hut. It was a transfer magic gate, leading to a place Rosie explained likely held over 2,000 individuals, including monsters far too many for the castle's security forces. They were almost at the hut, but upon arrival, discovered the gate had been destroyed. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Everyone turned to see a small individual perched on the edge of a nearby hill, asking Rosie what she was doing there with a human. The unfamiliar person was called Deller. Leela walked up, calling out to the smaller person, confirming her identity and her desire to speak with Cornelio. Deller gritted her teeth, telling Leela to shut up, stating that even if Leela was truly alive, it no longer mattered. The small demon used magic to transform into a dragon and began to prepare a breath attack. Roland asked Rosie if she could defend against the breath attack, to which she confirmed she could, if only once. The dark-haired male said that was good enough and asked the dark elf to take care of the useless woman, meaning Leela, offending both women, even if it wasn't an incorrect assessment in that situation. Rosie then used her magic to create a shield around herself and Leela, boasting that Roland probably wouldn't be able to do anything against Deller. But when she opened her eyes, Roland was already gone. The dragon unleashed its attack, and the two women survived. Rosie wondered where Roland was, speculating he had fled. But Roland instantly appeared at Deller's hand. The beast, shocked, attempted to send a breath attack toward Roland until he summoned a small spark of fire, charging toward the dragon. It recoiled, but not enough. Roland landed multiple hits on Deller. The small demon was forced out of its dragon form, falling to the ground unconscious. Rosie was furious that he had defeated Deller so effortlessly. Regardless, the three now needed a new way to reach the isolated island. Leela conceived an idea and asked if Roland could learn the magic. He confirmed he could, if it wasn't as complicated as shadow magic. One teaching session later, Roland effortlessly cast the gate magic, leaving the dark elf with her head bowed, wondering about this human. She began to dramatically tear up, lamenting her arduous training to learn the spell. Leela attempted to comfort her, stating Roland was simply more talented than the demon race, offering slight solace to the dark elf woman. It was time to go. The three held hands as Roland chanted, teleporting them to their destination, earning praise from Leela. They finally reached a close distance to the meeting place. Rosie warned Roland not to do anything rash, but he countered by asking if he should simply kill all the demons, given there were only about 2,000 of them. Rosie laughed, inviting him to try. Leela intervened, stopping the dark elf, stating Roland wasn't joking. This only confused Rosie further. They planned to move after a short break. Leela told the dark-haired male she wanted to speak with them first, before he resorted to killing anyone, hoping to prevent further casualties. After a short while, it was time to move. But Rosie soon noticed the absence of guards at the tower they were supposed to pass through. As they drew closer, roars and cheers echoed, causing the dark elf woman to realize it was already the day of action, a detail they had not shared with her. Roland explained it was likely the dragon was merely there to keep watch on her, as they probably never truly trusted her. Yet, she still wanted to believe they could succeed, especially since they had a doctor to check Leela's condition. The three climbed up, observing the vast numbers of the gathered army. Leela, however, still attempted to stand confidently, striving to capture everyone's attention, proclaiming she was indeed alive. Rosie tried to back her up. Everyone began to cheer as Leela apologized, urging them to abandon their revenge and return to Mackay, confusing all the demons. They couldn't believe the real Leela would utter such words. None of the demons could sense any magic power from Leela due to her collar, causing them to doubt her authenticity. All the demons reverted to cheering, their excitement and bloodlust for revenge against humans rekindled. Roland and Leela both realized the army was advancing toward Melly's home, placing her in danger. Leela tried to regain their attention, but no one glanced her way. Leela crumpled to the ground in defeat, still trying to make anyone listen, but her cries were drowned out by the army's cheers. The demons roared with triumphant cheers while Leela and Rosie watched. Roland listened, hidden behind a rock. Rosie attempted to comfort the demon woman until Leela, feeling she had endured enough, rose, an angry expression on her face, yelling at everyone not to underestimate her. She claimed it wasn't that she lacked magical power, but rather that she no longer needed it, having mastered the strongest skill in the world: instant death. Cornelio scoffed, calling her bluff. Leela, however, simply told him to return to the demon world, stating it was her final warning. He confidently continued, instructing the other demons to ignore her, declaring they would rebuild the demon lord's army and conquer human countries. Leela called him a fool, stating he was always the same, which, she admitted, was why he had been reliable in the past. But then she raised her hand. Roland, ready, summoned an attack for her to launch at Cornelio, piercing him within seconds. A tear fell down Leela's face. Cornelio, too, began to weep, weakly calling out to Leela, finally recognizing her as not a fake before he died. All the demons in the army cried out at his death. They were utterly confused by what had happened, how Cornelio's own sword had pierced him. But with enough muttering and contemplation, the demons began to believe Leela was, in fact, their former ruler, all thanks to the spell Roland had secretly assisted her with. Leela stood at the edge of the cliff, ordering everyone to obey her, or they would meet Cornelio's fate. Everyone complied without hesitation or complaint. In time, all would be returned to the demon world through a gate Rosie created. Leela then turned to Roland, asking how he had known her thoughts. He casually replied it was obvious, as he was the only one capable of such a feat. She chuckled, praising his excellent work in replicating her skill, but noted it wasn't the priority. Roland remembered the army should have a doctor and wondered if they would also return. Leela assured him the doctors would remain in the barracks for the time being. Despite his blank expression, he still worried about Leela's health, prompting her to tease him, though it had little effect. He told her they should go get her checked. She suddenly pulled away from Roland, stating she needed to go alone, confusing him. Leela walked away. Roland stared into the distance as Rosie approached, catching the dark-haired male's attention, asking where Leela had gone. Roland explained she had simply gone to the doctor and likely didn't want anyone else to see her. Rosie laughed, asserting she wouldn't want to be associated with him, as Leela supposedly trusted the dark elf woman far more than Roland. Rosie continued boasting about herself, asking if he wished to hear stories and memories of her and Leela. He, however, was utterly uninterested, yet she continued without hesitation. After a while, Rosie finished her narrative. The number of demons passing through the gate was dwindling, meaning it would only be a matter of time until everyone had retreated. Rosie remained astonished by Leela's power, believing the skill used earlier was Leela's own. She warned Roland to be careful, urging him not to upset Leela, adding he would likely be killed anyway, as he was no longer of any use to her. Roland, however, gave Rosie a look of pity. She was unaware he was the true source of the attack. Roland sought one piece of information from Rosie: why she was willing to go to such lengths for Leela, given the elf race had no relation to demons. His words surprised her, as it seemed he knew little about how a demon lord was chosen. He already knew it wasn't through heredity. Despite that, Rosie explained Leela was still the previous demon lord's daughter, and had nonetheless become the demon lord. Leela had always displayed overwhelming talent since childhood, leaving no room for objection when she ascended to the position, leading Roland to believe others who aspired to the role likely harbored grudges against her. Rosie's expression softened as she admitted that she, and likely many others, would sacrifice themselves for Leela. Roland had another question, prompting Rosie to ask if he was a liar. He pressed on, who had ordered her to do all she had done. If she were truly a moderate, she would have remained with the others in the demon world, regarding the radical's actions as merely something to be aware of. He asked her true aim in going to such trouble to find Leela and informing her of the uprising. Rosie replied she was simply following the orders of Leela's father, the Great King. Rosie had informed the Great King of Leela's status, and he had instructed Rosie to tell Leela about the uprising, knowing she would likely try to stop it, concluding that Leela's father couldn't idly stand by and let the radicals perish in vain. The dark elf woman expressed surprise that Leela had become powerless, but considered it fortunate that a dependable man was by her side. Flushing, she quickly attributed those words to Leela. Roland changed the subject, stating it was time to check on Leela. They ended up in the barracks, inquiring about Leela's condition from the doctor. The old woman simply told them to go confirm themselves. Roland and Rosie entered the building, finding Leela lying under the covers, embarrassed by her state. Leela didn't feel comfortable explaining things with Rosie present, so Roland ushered the dark elf outside. Leela, after some reluctance, told Roland she had simply been experimenting with new recipes a couple of days prior, performing numerous taste tests, only to discover the ingredients were bad. Roland asked if Leela was slow, which only flustered her further. Roland was simply glad she was okay. Leela was confused as to why she was the only one poisoned, given they had both eaten the same dish. Roland explained that a bit of poison wouldn't affect him, as he was trained for it. She somehow took offense, believing he was implying her dishes were poisonous. He confirmed that was indeed what he was saying. Despite that, Roland patted her head, telling her she shouldn't worry about sharing things with him and that she could try new recipes again, touching her deeply. He then kissed her. Rosie and the doctor entered the building, and the old woman gave Leela some digestive medicine for her stomach before everyone eventually departed. The dark elf announced she would return to the demon world for a while, as she had something to do. Roland and Leela eventually made their way back home. Roland knew he would have to apologize to Iris for missing a day of work. Leela suddenly spoke, stating the doctor's diagnosis was not what she expected. She timidly asked Roland what he would do if she were pregnant. The question caught him off guard, but he understood why she was asking, given their frequent intimacy. Leela admitted she would be quite happy at the thought of having a child with Roland. Roland, in turn, stated that should that happen, they would still strive for a normal life with their child. Meanwhile, a knight named Elvie knelt before King Randolph, thanking him for accepting a small country's request. The old man affirmed it was the right thing to do, as she was a friend of Illyria and one of the knights who had performed commendably in the war against the demons. They were forging an agreement for prosperity between their two nations, attempting to arrange Illyria's marriage to a man named Fabian. Even if Randolph doubted his daughter's happiness in the situation, he hoped she wouldn't throw a tantrum and seclude herself, making him consider Roland's help. But he couldn't rely on the dark-haired male for every situation involving Illyria. With an indirect apology, Randolph felt the situation was troubling enough to warrant Roland's assistance. The next day, Roland returned to work as usual, examining the various requests submitted to the guild with Milia. At some point during their task, something lingered in Roland's mind, and he decided to seek Milia's advice. He didn't outright lie, but he fabricated a scenario. He claimed a friend's lover had told the friend she would be happy if she got pregnant, and hearing that made the friend want to hug her. Roland sought to understand the emotions behind such a response. Milia slammed her hands on the table, explaining with excitement that it definitively meant his friend was happy and in love, her thoughts dwelling on the blissful couple. She returned to reviewing requests, changing the subject when she found one she believed suitable for Roland. It concerned a requester troubled by their ransacked orchard. They finished sorting all the requests, and Roland departed to investigate, borrowing a horse and bringing Leela along in her cat form. The orchard they were heading to cultivated Anadu fruits, sweet and sour yellow-colored produce. Roland was puzzled by Leela's inquiries about them until she explained her emotional investment in the quest. These were the fruits essential for one of her favorite dishes, Anadu pie. Roland attempted to reassure her that many vendors sold these fruits. As they traversed the road through the orchard, giant baboons emerged from the surrounding trees. Roland and Leela, however, remained unfazed, too preoccupied with thoughts of the Anatu. Roland proceeded to slice through any and all baboons that dared approach them. They theorized that whoever was stealing the fruits was harvesting directly from the trees, but they were unsure of the thieves' ultimate purpose. Their objective was to apprehend those responsible for this crime. Upon their arrival, Roland introduced himself to the couple, who explained they were simply field dwellers, their livelihood dependent on their orchard's income. Roland sensed their distress. If the theft continued, their means of survival was at risk. Roland felt a quiet indignation, mostly, it seemed, because the culprit was jeopardizing this couple's normal life. Hogan, the husband, expressed his desire to find the culprit himself, but quickly realized the inherent danger, a wise and accurate assessment. The wife noticed Leela on the floor, intently staring at a table laden with Anatu. She asked Roland if cats could eat Anatu, to which Roland replied that the fruits were actually Leela's favorite, giving Leela the opportunity to snatch some pieces while the three continued their discussion. Aside from the culprit's ability to climb fences, Hogan remembered seeing human-sized footprints and sticky drool on the trees and ground. The thought of an adult drooling everywhere puzzled Roland as to who or what could be stealing the fruits, but Hogan interrupted his thoughts, inquiring about the quest payment. The dark-haired male explained that fees varied by quest rank, and this particular quest would likely be C or D rank. This news made the couple hesitant, implying a significant cost. Leela then seemed to have an epiphany, catching Roland's attention. She had a feeling, she said, she knew who the culprit was. Both then remembered the numerous giant baboons they had encountered and killed en route. He explained to the couple that their orchard would likely no longer be ransacked, assuming the baboons were indeed the culprits. Roland was still not entirely convinced it was those monsters until Hogan's wife stated she had witnessed them at night. Roland then decided to take her to the baboon corpses, further confirming his suspicions when she recognized them. Roland admitted he was the one who defeated the baboons, but he knew this wasn't the end of the matter. Leela informed Roland that giant baboons were naturally forest dwellers. Roland resolved to investigate the nearby forest to understand what was happening. They made their way to the forest. Leela theorized that the monsters' unusual migration from the forest was due to a food shortage. Upon entering, they observed very few fruits and nuts, confirming the assumption of scarcity. The baboons in the forest looked thin, appearing extremely wary and likely to attack, but the beasts grew distressed as a loud sound erupted through the forest. Leela recognized it, an omnivore monster called a pleuris, its head poking out from the trees. Their horse, frightened, meant they would have to continue on foot to investigate, realizing the pleuris was not only stealing the baboons' food, but also consuming the monsters themselves. Leela, desiring to employ her skill as a demon lord, hopped off Roland's shoulders to attempt to communicate with the pleuris. She quickly learned the pleuris was unlikely to depart, infuriating her. She decided to return and wait on the horse while Roland removed his glasses, showing no mercy to the monster. In seconds, Roland seized the pleuris, spinning it around to disorient it, giving him the opportunity to use fallen trees to stab and kill the monster. they were finally able to leave the forest. Roland asked Leela if she knew the monster, to which Leela dodged the question, simply stating she had decided to return her former subordinate, still in the human world, to the demon world. Roland affirmed he would help, feeling an obligation to protect the people's daily lives. Leela was about to mention the scarcity of pleuris even in the demon world, but Roland saw no reason for her to bring it up, prompting her to chuckle and dismiss the thought. Roland returned to the guild, where Iris questioned his delay, prompting his apology. She was confused by his apology, but Roland noted her angry tone, leaving the woman conflicted on how to act around him. Iris instructed him to sit so they could discuss the report. Iris mentioned that because Roland had defeated the pleuris, adventurers from the guild had gone to the forest to collect its loot. He acknowledged this, admitting he had probably acted rashly. Iris, however, didn't see it as rash, respecting his willingness to help those in need. Roland's eyes, however, were still focused elsewhere as Iris continued, explaining the importance of building trust by fostering relationships between staff and clients, something Roland had excelled at. Iris also thanked him for bringing the Anatu fruits and stated that concluded the report. But then she remembered. The king had sent a request for Roland, handing it to him to read later. Roland took it. Before leaving, he decided to inform Iris that her underwear had been showing the entire time, and he assumed she was doing it intentionally, leaving the woman extremely flustered as he promptly exited. A few days later, the guild received a gift from the orchard. Roland distributed 2 fruits to each person and 3 to Iris, seemingly calming her and dispelling her earlier displeasure. Roland took the rest home, knowing they were Leela's favorite. She was touched by his attentiveness, happily biting into a piece he offered. Later, Roland accepted the king's request to serve as a bodyguard for Illyria's marriage. He informed Iris he was going on a business trip, but Leela believed he was being taken advantage of. Roland, however, stated that normal staff didn't refuse job offers. They then spotted King Randolph and stumbled upon the old man seemingly engaged in an intimate moment with a younger woman. The two were startled and screamed before Roland summarily ejected the woman and entered the carriage to discuss the request with Randolph. Roland, expressing his reluctance to involve himself in political affairs, was told by Randolph that he could refuse if he wished. Roland sighed, however, deciding he might as well help, as he was already there, much to the king's ecstasy. They were en route to the Somali coast, a neutral territory, making Roland's presence all the more reassuring. Randolph had limited information to impart to Roland, beyond the fact that Illyria's marriage partner was Fabian Reuben, the first prince of the Divine Kingdom, and his messenger was his knight, Elvi. Roland recognized Elvi's name and knew that the Reuben's kingdom held the second highest authority in the force opposing the Demon Lord's army. He also remembered Elvi had been part of his party before he defeated the Demon Lord. Since Elvi was like a sister to Illyria, Randolph hadn't the heart to refuse her. He understood that if the marriage succeeded, it would form a crucial alliance, provided Illyria didn't reject it. Roland observed Randolph's progression from being merely a doting parent, then asked him, while he was at it, to cease his flirtations with the woman from earlier, as their distant sounds were quite audible. This prompted the old man to laugh, admitting he was quite aware and did it to entertain his subordinates during the journey. Eventually, they arrived at a small town for a brief rest. Randolph decided to introduce the knight commander, Gregor, to Roland. The commander chuckled when he learned Roland introduced himself as a guild staff member. Roland then asked the old man who else knew he was there. Randolph stated that, aside from Gregor, only the king himself knew. Roland asked Gregor if he had noticed him in the king's carriage, explaining the king had personally summoned him. In Gregor's eyes, however, Roland remained a suspicious figure. Leela interjected, insulting the knights, offending Gregor, who reached for his sword. Roland, however, grabbed the weapon, stopping it from being unsheathed, stating that if he were an assassin, the king would have long been dead. Leela again insulted the knights further, but Roland had enough. He simply stuffed her into his bag and tied it shut to prevent further comments. Randolph informed Roland they would leave it at that and assured Gregor that Roland could be trusted, as he was Illyria's tutor. This immediately prompted an apology and a change in Gregor's demeanor. Command was to be transferred to Roland, a decision everyone accepted once they understood Roland was merely Illyria's tutor. He instructed everyone to form groups of 10, positioning themselves around the carriage, with 2 messengers in each group. Gregor inquired about his role, to which Roland told him to walk, unless he preferred to ride a horse and serve as a messenger. They departed, with Leela now allowed to sit on the horse next to Roland, finding the view much more pleasant without the knights packed so closely. She joked, asking if he wished to join her army, claiming they would have 1 more wars with him on their side. He, in turn, joked back, warning her to be wary of him aiming for her head, as he was stronger than her. Despite her pout, she offered one last remark, suggesting they would have another demon army once they were blessed with a child. Later, after their departure, one of Roland's groups reported an attack by bandits, their numbers quickly escalating to almost 100. Roland instructed the messengers to order other groups to form a tight formation while he scouted the area. Leela, observing, was impressed by the knights' continued competence, despite her earlier opinion of them as rotten. Roland passed by, seizing one of the knights' weapons, then carved a path through many of the bandits. He urged the knights to maintain their formation and teach the bandits not to underestimate them, motivating everyone. Roland then focused on the apparent leader, who seemed unalarmed until Roland drew his attention to an enemy. The stranger lunged, but Roland effortlessly deflected the attacks, disarming the bandit, then sliced his arm and stabbed him in the head before he could unleash a magical attack. The remaining bandits, shocked, fled, leaving no major casualties for the knights. He praised everyone, but the moment was interrupted by Illyria, charging into the area with a furious energy, ready to strike down the enemy. Roland explained they had already retreated. She turned, saw Roland, and instantly grew excited, believing he was there to halt the marriage. Roland clarified he was merely a bodyguard, but the princess dismissed his words, insisting he could rest assured. She intended to refuse the marriage. Another group arrived to report that Reuben's army was approaching, causing Illyria to immediately depart, her interest waning. They greeted Prince Fabian, who was relieved everyone was safe with no major casualties. He inquired if Roland had captured the bandit leader. Roland, however, stated he had killed him. Fabian's gaze dropped for a moment before he smiled, praising their actions. As to why he paused, no one knew. Eventually, Fabian and his army departed to meet their king. Roland mused that Fabian marrying Illyria would undoubtedly become the biggest story since the Demon King's defeat, leaving both of them hoping for a favorable outcome. Leela was finally able to shed her cat form and run joyfully along the beach where they would stay during the arranged marriage. She informed Roland she would play for a while he was summoned to see the king. He was led to a blue-roofed villa, where he witnessed Illyria being informed that she, her father, Fabian, and King Reuben would all dine together. Illyria, however, with a hesitant expression, timidly stated she wasn't feeling well. Randolph, dismissive, told her they were already there and she shouldn't make such selfish remarks, as it was merely a conversation and dinner. Roland interjected, speaking to the pouting, grumbling girl, reminding her she was a king's daughter and should grow up a little, making her appear even more crestfallen and mopey. She understood, she said. With that, the maids escorted Illyria back to her room to prepare for dinner. Randolph stood there with a sigh, worried about the impending events, especially since the girl still had to meet the prince alone. The next day, Elvie entered the room, offering her greetings to King Randolph, who told her she needn't be so formal. She was there, she explained, out of concern for Illyria, and as a member of the Hayden family, she bore great responsibility to unite the two families. Elvie turned with a smile, seeking Illyria, but was met only with Roland's blank expression. Confused for a moment, she then grew upset, shouting, demanding to know where he had been. The girl began to cry, explaining everyone had been searching for him, believing him dead. Roland, however, cut her off, stating that while he was sure she had much to say, they needed to save it for later, as he had something to ask about first. After a while of discussion, a lady in an exquisitely luxurious dress stood on the beach, gazing at the waves. Roland approached, asking if she found the sight beautiful, catching her attention. He also sought confirmation. Was she Prince Fabian's secretary? She recognized him as the bodyguard commander of Fend. He wondered if he was disturbing her, attempting to be charming and subtle about his intentions. The woman assured him he wasn't. He then explained he was strolling, hoping to see something again, and had finally found it, prompting her chuckle as she asked what that something was. Roland brought the woman to dinner, and they shared a delightful time, smiling at each other. But the day, inevitably, had to end. They walked through the empty streets together. Lenora felt happy. It was the first time a man had asked her out like that, blushing from the amount she had drunk. Roland caught her attention, suggesting a quiet place to rest and continue their evening. She hesitated for a moment, then, blushing even more, agreed. Meanwhile, Leela sat alone on the beach, in tears, feeling terribly lonely after Roland had left. But he eventually returned, making her ecstatic. She was transformed back into her cat form. Roland walked back with her as she explained how she had gotten too excited by the beach and waves, failing to notice when he had departed so quickly, leaving her feeling utterly isolated. They finally reached their designated room. Leela, excited, leaped into bed, letting out a large sigh of relief as she could finally lie down. Roland looked out the window, knowing a certain event was imminent. He used his magic to summon a shadow to observe this event. He knew this situation mirrored the Balder case, and how he struggled to easily sever ties with those he knew. Illyria was currently having her private meeting with the prince. He asked if she was tired and wished to rest, to which she begrudgingly agreed. They sat at a small table, eating and drinking. Fabian suggested she try the pineapple juice, which Illyria quietly acknowledged. This caused the boy to twitch, a shadow falling over his face. He knew Illyria appeared uninterested, her attitude implying she felt forced to be with him. Fabian forced a smile, though his eyes held a simmering rage. He was angry she seemed to look down on others like him, simply because she was a hero. He wouldn't usually forgive women who didn't admire him, yet he found this more interesting. Watching the girl drink, he wondered what face Illyria would make once his plan unfolded. She noticed his stare and asked why he was doing that. He lied, claiming he was simply mesmerized by her beauty, but quickly changed the subject, asking how she liked the drink. Illyria still appeared cold, but admitted it wasn't bad. Fabian, however, knew her attitude would soon change, giving him the opportunity to do as he wished with her. Suddenly, something began to shift within the girl as she pulled away from her drink. Fabian called for her attention. Illyria looked toward him, calling him by name and honorific, a show of respect. He grabbed her hand, asking if she would marry him and become the next queen of the country. Illyria, her eyes lifeless, happily agreed. Fabian suggested they inform their fathers at the upcoming lunch gathering. Illyria seemed to agree to this as well, but it was not of her own volition, of course. The prince smiled evilly, believing the princess was now under his control, and he would finally be able to make the princess hero, who was originally uninterested in him, do as he pleased until he was satisfied. However, a small noise startled the boy. He thought it was the sound of the floor creaking, but it was merely the sound of the shadow Roland had summoned, retreating. Fabian made his way back to the mansion and greeted his father, stating everything was going according to plan. King Reuben chuckled, adding that with this, the Farron kingdom would fall into the hands of the Reuben family. Both looked forward to the lunch gathering, and that gathering soon arrived. The four royals sat at the table eating, while everyone else stood on the sidelines. King Reuben attempted to initiate conversation, asking his son about his morning walk with the princess. Both Fabian and Illyria rose from the table, standing side by side, as Fabian announced he had something to report. He claimed he had proposed to Illyria, and she had accepted, causing the entire room to erupt in shock and disbelief. Fabian's father urged everyone to calm down while Fabian proceeded to attempt to kiss the girl. She, however, seemed to whisper something. He leaned closer to Illyria, asking what she said, until Illyria suddenly punched the prince, declaring she had told him not to come any closer. He flew across the room, his clothes dirtied by food, but his focus was on the confusion he felt. Illyria had broken free from his trance. Fabian stared, bewildered, wondering why the love potion wasn't working, having been told it should last for months, if not a year. The prince looked around, trying to identify who could have sabotaged his plan, and his eyes landed on Roland, who sported a faint grin, confirming Fabian's suspicions. King Reuben approached, asking what was happening, but Fabian tried to frame it as Illyria having slapped him first. The girl, however, retorted it was because he had attempted to kiss her. She hurled several insults, but Elvi approached, telling Illyria to calm down, as they didn't clearly understand the situation. Illyria explained the prince had forcefully tried to kiss her, but Fabian insisted he hadn't, claiming she had said all those things earlier. They continued to argue until Roland stepped forward, stating he would explain what had happened, surprising Randolph, who wondered how Roland could possibly know anything about the situation. Roland explained that Illyria had returned from the date in a state of intoxication, which was why she likely didn't remember the wedding proposal, and why he had helped sober her up to allow her to join the lunch gathering without issue. Fabian tried to argue Illyria couldn't have gotten drunk, as she only drank juice. Roland, however, knew otherwise. He stated the prince had done something to strip the princess of her ability to make decisions, causing Fabian to grow upset at the accusation. The dark-haired male felt things were going nowhere and called for a witness to enter the room. Lenora entered the dining room and was asked if it was true that Fabian was preparing something before the date. The woman confirmed it, admitting the prince had ordered her to give a large sum of money to the cafe clerk and tell them to mix a love potion into Illyria's juice. Fabian grew desperate, yelling at the woman to be quiet, but it was too late. Everyone began to glare at the boy with disgust. The prince tried to yell at Lenora, but she retorted, asking if he even remembered her name. He hesitated, unable to answer, causing Lenora to tear up in anger as she declared she no longer wished to associate with someone who couldn't even recall her name. Everyone in the room stared at Fabian, including his own father, making him feel cornered. He shouted in anger, claiming everyone was trying to set him up. Illyria, however, stated that was incorrect. It was he who had tried to set her up. The people in the room began to feel pity for Lenora and worried about what would happen to her family after defying the prince. Randolph, however, assured the woman she needn't worry. She had acted admirably by remaining honest, even when it meant defying her master. From then on, he would ensure the Farron kingdom cared for her and her entire family. Despite what had happened, King Reuben still attempted to salvage the situation. He ostensibly apologized to King Randolph for his son's behavior, hoping for forgiveness for his rashness of youth. Fabian was confused by his father's sudden betrayal, but King Reuben claimed no knowledge of the situation. However, he attempted to pivot again, stating that while Fabian's forceful attempt to kiss the princess was regrettable, he didn't believe the princess was drugged and then purified, or that such an intoxicating drug could even exist. Illyria attempted to attest to the case as the victim, but Reuben dismissed her, asking if she was trying to incite war between the two countries, causing the girl to back down. Roland had expected the king to be eloquent with words. Elvi tried to interject, but was silenced by King Reuben, who stated he expected great things from her. He then claimed that the words and report came from a mere guild employee, asserting there was no evidence, and it was possible Roland was conspiring with the princess to frame Fabian. Randolph also interjected, along with Elvi, both unwilling to let King Reuben defile their honor. Roland decided he had had enough. He removed his glasses, then mentioned something about a Friday purge, causing King Reuben to immediately recognize Roland as the assassin he once was. The king's demeanor instantly shifted. He backed off. Fabian's father retracted all his previous statements, attempting to pin all the blame on his son. Randolph, however, asserted they were fathers before kings and needed to take responsibility for their children. King Reuben and his son bowed, apologizing for their actions. King Randolph forgave them, but stated they would have to redeem themselves for the incident, then promptly departed, leaving King Reuben gripping his legs in frustration. The old man laughed, pleased to have brought Roland along to ensure things went smoothly. Elvi and Illyria, however, wanted to ask him about the Friday purge, especially as it was the first time they had seen King Reuben in such a panic. Unfortunately, the time for Elvie to depart arrived, and she felt frantic, wishing for more time with Roland. She began asking him many questions, including where he lived and if he had a loved one. He, unwilling to answer these, simply told Elvie to go, causing Illyria to tease the girl. Elvie promised to write letters every 3 days, but Roland stated that was too many. A new letter would arrive before the previous one even reached him, frustrating and flustering Elvie. She eventually departed. Illyria walked off with the taller male, asking the same questions as Elvie, along with others, but Roland didn't answer those either. Eventually, they stumbled upon Leela, who decided to reveal herself to Illyria, much to the girl's excitement, happy to see an animal. Leela explained to the girl that a good woman was someone men pursued. These words caused Illyria to regard the cat as a mentor. As Leela explained, she was more experienced than Illyria could ever be. Roland realized it was probably time for him to leave and went to say goodbye to Randolph, who felt bad for troubling the dark-haired male. The old man, frustrated with everything, admitted that despite Roland's desire for a normal life, he would have no complaints if Illyria married Roland. Roland apologized and refused, prompting a sigh from Randolph. The king declared he would simply have to produce an heir himself. Roland, however, expressed doubts, betting 100,000 ren that the king would retire at the age of 57. Randolph agreed, stating whoever got closest to the age in 8 years would win. Everyone made their way back. Leela felt happy to have met Illyria in a positive way and hoped they could be friends, a concept she had learned from Milia, as friends were something normal people had. Leela then remembered something else and asked why he had even helped the royals in the first place. He hadn't wanted to be involved and could have simply left it be. Leela believed he likely just saw them as friends to worry about. A new worldview seemed to dawn on Roland. It was not a bad thing to want to help others, even if they were involved with royalty. Setting that aside, Leela had something else to discuss and suddenly adopted an expression of rage, knowing he had slept with another woman the previous night. She wished to emphasize that while she didn't care what he did with others, she wanted to be the only woman unrivaled by others. Leela continued to argue until she eventually became flustered as Roland chuckled, grabbed her face, and kissed her as they stood together on the beach. The next day, Roland went to work. Milia approached him, mentioning someone had been watching them, making adventurers feel as though they were being stalked. He looked out the window and saw Rosie leaning against it, startling Milia. Roland stated he would handle it. The dark-haired male walked outside, asking Rosie what she wanted. She tried to lie, claiming she was merely out for a walk, but she was a poor liar. Roland quickly deduced she had been observing him ever since he and Leela had been intimate the previous night. Roland, in various ways, repeatedly asked if this was her indirect way of asking to join them. Rosie, flustered, had to admit she was merely there to assess whether he was a suitable partner for Leela. He told her she could observe from inside the guild instead of spying from the window. He walked back into the building, bringing attention to the two, as most people had never seen an elf, let alone one of Rosie's caliber. Roland instructed her to observe quietly from the sidelines, then walked back to Milia, explaining the situation and suggesting it was likely Rosie had a crush on him. Milia, however, disagreed, stating Rosie seemed to be smiling evilly while staring at Roland. Milia then elaborated on how a woman with a crush on a man would behave, describing various telltale signs. Rosie, it turned out, was exhibiting all of these behaviors, further convincing Roland that Rosie likely harbored a crush on him. Milia also advised that if a woman had a crush on him, he shouldn't act annoyed or ignore them, but rather treat them kindly. When everyone's lunch break began, he walked outside the guild, leading Rosie to assume he was going to discard Leela's lunch. But he merely sat down, stating he was seeking a quiet place to eat, making her feel bad for her assumption. He offered to share his food with her, causing Rosie internal conflict, as she felt happy about the offer. She reluctantly accepted, tasting the wonderful food, before returning to watching Roland with a hawk-like intensity. The dark elf woman watched Roland throughout his normal workday until Iris approached him, asking if he could go to a certain place the following Monday. Rosie inquired if he was having a confidential, up-to-no-good conversation, but he simply stated he was going on a business trip and asked if she wanted to come, upsetting her once again. Later, one of the guild staff members begged Roland to attend a drinking party, but Roland was hesitant, feeling no need to drink with strangers. At some point, the employee asserted that joining a drinking party to meet new people was normal, and the mere mention of normal instantly swayed Roland. Rosie then darted off to the men who were leaving, asking if Roland intended to play with other women when he had Leela. Roland, however, maintained it was merely part of work. She still wished to observe, hoping to uncover his true nature, but Roland assured the others that Rosie was harmless, and everyone continued their way to the bar. Just before entering, all the men decided to hold a quick meeting, strategizing who would aim for which girl. Morley attempted to claim he needn't limit himself to just one, but the other two argued with him, stating he couldn't disregard teamwork, as love was unlikely to find him anyway. They finally entered the establishment, introducing themselves to each other. One of the women, Hilda, inquired about Rosie, who was still watching, but Roland advised them not to mind her. Two of the women had heard about Roland from Milia. Roland remembered these were the two women Rye and Shane were targeting. So, Roland skillfully used his communication abilities to guide the women into conversation with the other two men, easily succeeding. All that remained was Morley, but Roland glanced over to see him merely staring at Diana's chest, prompting Roland to decide to ignore him and simply drink quietly. After a while of drinking, Roland felt the effects of his skill dissipating as Diana began conversing with him. She admitted she could handle a lot of alcohol, being an adventurer who drank whenever possible. Morley, however, interrupted, asking Roland what he was doing talking to his girl. Morley continued to stare at Diana's chest and suddenly attempted to hungrily tackle the woman, uttering inappropriate things. Roland quickly incapacitated him. Everyone continued to drink and eat while Roland got to know the two adventurer women. They had heard that all quests handled by him went smoothly. He explained he was simply guiding every adventurer to their full potential, impressing both women with his professionalism. Diana wondered what he was hiding behind his facade. She offered another drink, to which he asked if it was already too much. She, however, wondered if he would loosen his tongue when drunk, posing a challenge to him as he had never been intoxicated before. Eventually, everyone had to go home. Roland bid goodbye to the grateful men who had successfully spoken to the girls they desired. The two men and two women walked off, one of the latter being carried on his back, while Tatam walked beside him. The shorter girl asked if they could do this again sometime, which he casually accepted before walking her back to the inn she was staying at. Diana, the last girl, led the man in a specific direction, a quieter place rarely frequented by others, implying they could indulge in certain risky activities in peace, or so they thought. They were interrupted by Rosie in the distance, being harassed by some men. Roland apologized, stating he had business to attend to, and walked off. Diana chuckled to herself, knowing she wouldn't let him go so easily next time. The dark-haired male made his way to the men, scaring them off by claiming rumors circulated about him having 3,000 adventurers as his subordinates. Rosie was surprised by this news, even though it was a lie and an exaggeration. Roland, however, was more focused on urging the dark elf woman to be more careful next time. She thanked him, then, flustered, ran off angrily, still proclaiming she didn't acknowledge him. He watched her run, squinting his eyes, feeling as though he was forgetting something. But it probably wasn't too important. Prior to this, Iris had instructed Roland to participate in a training course on Monday. Roland complied, acting as an instructor, bringing Leela along. Leela lay in bed, remarking that the accommodations were slightly worse than the previous aristocrat's villa and couldn't be compared. She looked at the paper Iris had given Roland, puzzled as to why humans had to hold a training course annually. The dark-haired male explained it made sense, as it was crucial to regularly enforce policies for everyone within an organization. The demon woman didn't particularly care about the ongoing training. She was simply excited for food when he returned, which Roland reluctantly affirmed. Leela intended to explore the city in his absence, but Roland warned her that guard presence had increased due to the princess being psychologically attacked by a demon not long ago, a fact Leela was already aware of. Roland was impressed such an event had occurred, as Illyria would typically be fine against an average demon, implying a powerful adversary. Leela chuckled at this before bidding Roland goodbye and venturing into the bustling city. Excitement filled the woman as she walked through the crowded capital, impressed by the diversity of races. She was quickly distracted by the enticing aroma of food from a street stall. Leela ordered 2 kebabs from the old lady grilling them, but then noticed a strange hooded figure in the distance. She was brought back to reality when the lady asked for payment. Leela realized, with a growing panic, that her purse was missing. The lady concluded Leela had likely been pickpocketed. The demon woman began to tear up dramatically. It was her favorite purse, purchased by Roland. But the same hooded figure from before suddenly approached Leela, offering to pay for her food in exchange for certain information. When Leela turned, her eyes widened in shock as she recognized the person under the hood. Meanwhile, Roland was making his way to the training course. He entered a building and sat at a desk, overhearing that the day's lecturer was the apprentice of a grand magician named Gilman, a familiar name to Roland. A man entered the room, commanding everyone's attention, boastfully introducing himself as Samuel before beginning his lecture. Roland immediately noticed a mismatch between the man's energy and his knowledge. Samuel was only teaching basic magic. The man next to Roland asked if he was taking notes, but Roland stated he was the type to memorize information, impressing the spiky-haired man. Roland realized many employees at the course lacked magical knowledge. Eventually, Samuel demonstrated flame magic to everyone. Roland, noticing an inefficiency, asked to give his own demonstration. He explained that magic circles should be drawn simpler for faster casting, then drew his own circle and cast a significantly stronger flame spell. The lecturer fell to the floor in shock, while everyone in the room was surprised and awestruck by Roland's skills. Samuel demanded to know who Roland was. The dark-haired male countered that the question should be his own. Samuel grew confused until Roland explained Gilman didn't take apprentices, causing the lecturer to feel intimidated by Roland's cold glare. In seconds, Roland reverted to his normal demeanor, helped Samuel up, then walked back to his seat, stating that was all from him. Samuel returned to the chalkboard to continue the lecture, but everyone in the room was already distracted. Some around Roland tapped his shoulder, asking if he could demonstrate the magic again. They were all happy to see him challenge the lecturer, who always looked down on employees while boasting about his position. These 3 asked Roland about his past position, but Roland only responded he didn't have much of a background and they should focus on the lecture. Unfortunately, there was nothing left to pay attention to, as Samuel had seemingly left, likely ashamed of what had transpired. The 3 decided to introduce themselves as Roy, Shayla, and Nina, to whom Roland reluctantly introduced himself, wondering why he needed to introduce himself to people he wouldn't meet again. Shayla mentioned hearing the lecturer was sponsored by an aristocrat, but Roland was confused by the term sponsored. He learned that being sponsored by an aristocrat typically meant one possessed a private army, a title usually earned after tutoring aristocratic children or serving as their bodyguard. Roy suddenly asked Roland if he would be in trouble for expressing his opinion to Samuel, mentioning he heard a colleague was threatened and fired for similar actions. Roland casually stated he hadn't done anything wrong, but a knight suddenly burst through the lecture hall doors, demanding to know who had mocked Samuel. Roland stood, identifying himself before the other employees could warn him. Roland hadn't realized anything was amiss until Shayla explained that remaining silent was the normal thing to do, making him feel careless about his actions. He attempted to downplay it, claiming he didn't want to cause trouble, touching them with his apparent goodness, until the knight gruffly told Roland to hurry up. The knight asked for Roland's name, but Roland, without hesitation, refused, stating a true knight would honor etiquette above all else, infuriating the knight, who attempted to punch Roland. This punch was not new to Roland. He dodged it, yet feigned being struck, falling to the floor. The knight, confused, hadn't felt the punch either. The knight still boasted of his prowess, while Nina rushed over, worrying about Roland, who held his right cheek in fake pain, correcting its placement when Nina pointed to his left. Suddenly, the lecture hall windows shattered as a large, intimidating aura filled the air outside, quickly revealed to be Illyria, with Leela tagging along. Illyria was enraged, ignoring Leela's pleas for calm, convinced the knight had punched Roland. The knight, unaware Illyria's wrath was directed at him, knelt, attempting to introduce himself. Roland tried to warn the knight to flee, confusing him, until the princess smashed her fist into the ground, ordering the knight to apologize to Roland. The knight frantically complied until Roland told him to go, stating he would handle the situation. The knight departed. Roland asked Illyria what she was doing there, and if princesses truly had so much free time. Illyria told the dark-haired male to shut up and asked if Leela was his friend, saying Leela had brought her there when she asked about him. He remembered Leela had been in her cat form when he and Illyria first met, but where was she now? Regardless, Roland needed to establish what was happening and asked why she had come to the lecture hall. The girl explained she wanted to accompany him to dinner if he was eating alone. Roland could only stare in bafflement as Illyria continued to explain herself, but Roland reminded her he had repeatedly told her not to let her anger get the better of her. Despite that, he did thank her for her actions, as they were for his sake. Illyria chuckled sheepishly, asking if he wanted her to wait for him. Roland, however, coldly told the girl he was there to do a job and didn't wish to be disturbed, exasperating the princess before she eventually ran out the window. Back home, Roland recounted the entire story to Leela later at dinner. The demon chuckled at the thought of it. She remarked that Illyria was strong but wouldn't have defeated her if she hadn't been wearing the collar, to which Roland agreed. Leela also mentioned that Illyria's feelings for Roland were closer to love than respect, wondering why he hadn't accepted her. Roland, however, stated Illyria was still too childish, and that Leela was the closest to being a perfect woman. These words caught Leela by surprise, and she began to drink even more, getting drunk faster than usual. Roland urged her to stop drinking until Samuel, at a nearby table, drunkenly interrupted him, insulting him to another person at the table. Samuel was chugging alcohol, boasting about the time he was taught by Gilman, while Leela was also chugging her drink, wondering when she would have a child with Roland. Eventually, Samuel noticed Roland and challenged him to a duel. Leela, mistaking Samuel's challenge as directed at her, accepted. Samuel, too focused on Leela's beauty, told the woman to jump at his chest. But Leela suddenly collapsed due to her drunkenness, accidentally pulling down the balding man's pants in front of the entire restaurant. She began to cackle at the smallness of something belonging to Samuel before she was knocked out by Roland, who apologized to the other person for the trouble and wished them a good night. The next day, Roland went to the lecture hall, chatting with the other three from the previous day, until someone entered the building, calling for him. Count Ziga's Constantine, they announced, requested his presence. People wondered why Zigas was asking for Roland, but it was likely due to the previous day's incident with Samuel. Shayla warned Roland to be cautious with his words when speaking to him, as everyone else grimaced, mentioning rumors of people being beheaded for displeasing the Count. Roland took note of these rumors and proceeded to the room where the Count sat with a confident grin. Zigas began discussing the events between Roland and Samuel the previous day, and how people were starting to believe the establishment was teaching ineffective magic. The aristocrat tried to compel Roland to apologize to Samuel in front of everyone, but Roland refused. Zigas then picked up the sword next to him, pointing it at Roland's throat, asking if Roland was like him if he had killed many people. While true, Zigas was unaware of the sheer number of people Roland had killed in his lifetime, assuming it was around 5 or 10, while boasting of his own 16 kills, claiming to remember everything clearly. Roland grasped the tip of the blade with just 2 fingers. Ziggaz, confused, couldn't move the sword. Roland, without responding, simply stated that Ziggaz only heard the voices of the dead because it was a hallucination born of his conscience, calling him a cute fledgling assassin. It was likely Ziggaz murdered by impulse, only to be tormented by his conscience, forcing him to escape reality through drink. Roland told the man not to forget the people he had killed, for they would haunt him forever, causing Ziggaz to demand how many people Roland had killed. Roland's only response was a question: "How many times have you breathed in your lifetime?" Once that was over, Roland instructed the aristocrat to inform Samuel that he apologized for embarrassing him, which Ziggaz seemed to have already moved past. There was something else the man wished to ask Roland: how much money Roland desired to be recruited. Roland, however, stated he had already grown fond of his current job, then turned toward the doors. Ziggaz asked who Roland truly was. The dark-haired male simply replied he was an employee of the guild before leaving. Roland made his way back to the place he was staying with Leela, finding her still suffering from a terrible hangover after all her drinking the previous night. He informed her they were going home now, surprising her, as she felt she hadn't played enough where they were. The dark-haired male simply told the demon woman she could always create a gate to get there any time she wished, immediately calming her. Suddenly, a person ran up to Roland, informing him that the guild master, Taro Pao, requested his presence. This name was familiar to Roland. He instructed the messenger to tell Taro he had already left, but the messenger insisted, begging Roland to come. Roland sighed, a disappointed expression on his face, before agreeing, following the messenger to a certain building. As they ascended to the top, the messenger urged Roland to behave in front of the master. Roland stated he would, but the messenger knew Roland's words were insincere. He casually walked into the room at the end of the hallway, despite the messenger's frantic warnings, and was greeted by Taro, who excitedly approached Roland. Taro was surprised to learn Roland had truly become a guild staff member. Roland surmised it was Taro who had informed Iris he was a former assassin, prompting the shorter male to laugh and apologize. Taro immediately got to the point, stating two important matters he wished to discuss with Roland. One concerned large-scale quests in the LTE branch. Whenever such quests emerged, the nearest adventurers would immediately respond, but things would invariably become troublesome and dangerous, or the quest would remain unfinished due to adventurers squabbling over command. Taro wished to implement tactical advisors, with Roland being one of them. Roland immediately refused, asking why he should be chosen. Taro replied that was the second matter he wished to discuss, asking Roland if he was aware of the current situation in the demon world. There were apparently rumors of demons discussing the Demon Lord's revival. Taro wanted Roland to assume command should a large-scale quest emerge. With enough pleading, Roland finally agreed. Taro, pleased, stated he would provide more details later. As Roland prepared to leave the room, the shorter male suddenly asked if Roland knew anything about the Demon Lord's revival. Roland, however, stated he didn't, and that the Demon Lord had been defeated by the hero's party. He then departed, riding a horse back to his town through a gate. Leela seemed a bit down, thinking the demons were probably referring to her. Roland stated it was possible it was a different person, making her feel a bit better as she changed the subject, excited by his promotion to tactical advisor. She suggested celebrating with some sake, but Roland knew this was just an excuse to drink again. Roland wondered why Taro had asked him if he knew something about the situation, as the only people who knew he had defeated the Demon Lord were King Randolph. Leela asked what was wrong, but Roland said it was nothing and simply continued on. She then suggested they visit that place again on holiday. Roland responded she better not let her wallet get stolen next time, causing her to groan in frustration at the memory. A day came when a man named Lenny Key somehow found his way to Roland's house, claiming he wanted Leela in exchange for not exposing their secret. This strange man expressed his desire for the demon woman for his slave collection, but knew Roland's answer would be no. He asked Roland if he was sure, asserting he knew everything about Leela and their relationship thanks to his skill. But Leela had one thing to say: a warning not to anger Roland. Lenny looked over with a smug grin, laughing, wondering what was so fearsome about Roland, until the dark-haired male stated that while Lenny's clairvoyant skill was powerful, he relied on it too much. Long story short, Lenny was killed, and the nearby birds fed on his body. Roland had gone to work. Milia inquired about Lenny, asking if that man had come to Roland's house. Roland denied any knowledge, assuaging Milia's worry, though she still mused about the terrifying prospect of clairvoyance. Roland agreed, but believed some things were better left unknown. Once he was home, Leela discussed Lenny's foolishness, mentioning she had never seen Roland so angry before, wondering if he thought she would have been taken by that man. He wanted to dismiss it, but admitted he would have found it inconvenient if Leela were taken away. Leela wrapped her arms around him, uttering a foreign word Roland didn't recognize. He inquired about it until she explained it was an ancient demon word meaning, "May your happiness never end." Roland, in turn, kissed her hand and returned it. She blushed, about to kiss him, until he pulled away, confusing and upsetting her. He then walked to the front door. People were outside. The people in question were the former slaves of Lenny, the man Roland had killed earlier. Unsure how to express their gratitude for being saved, they offered their assistance. He asked if they wished to become adventurers, an offer they accepted. So, he and Leela helped them clean up. Leela had also prepared them some food, for which the girls thanked them. One of them told Roland that even if he hadn't helped them, someone would have done it sooner or later. Eventually, the girls asked if he could give them names, but Leela quickly interjected, naming all of them: Idu, Leon, Shu, and Sue. They all thanked the demon woman, addressing her as a married woman, making her happy. Roland decided the girls would stay with them for the time being, assuring them they would no longer be cruelly treated. He did, however, worry about whether they would pass the adventurer's exam. Surprisingly, all of them passed. Idu possessed terrible practical skills, but an aptitude for magic. Leon was the opposite of Idu, displaying beast folk characteristics that would aid her as a scout. Shu had the unique raw power of a dwarf and much room for growth, while Sue, as expected of an elf, had an aptitude for magic and skill in archery. Roland wondered why Lenny had specifically enslaved these 4 girls, but knew they would all grow exponentially with proper training. He wanted them to form a team, but the 4 immediately argued over who would be leader. Eventually, they settled it with rock, paper, scissors, with Idu winning. Once that was settled, Roland instructed them to take a quest from the counter and come to him with any questions. They, in turn, replied he could rely on them for help as well. The next day, the girls had been diligently completing many quests, their most recent being watching over a field. A duo overheard the quest, wondering why they were undertaking such a mundane task when they could pursue something more exciting and rewarding. However, the girls appeared content with their quests, returning excitedly, eager for another. Roland asked if Sue had any complaints, as she had been a bit quieter, but she dismissed it. Roland then walked off to find another quest. People in the building gossiped, speculating about his relationship with the girls, making wild assumptions simply because they addressed him with a respectful honorific. Eventually, Roland gave them a quest about collecting detoxification grass, a mission with no limit to the amount they could bring. They departed without hesitation. Milia was impressed he had given them a different quest, but he knew they would have grown bored with smaller tasks. However, the girl asked what he would do about the other quest Iris had given them. Luckily, Nil and his accomplice walked through the door, and Roland knew the perfect people for the job. Eventually, the girls completed the quest, receiving a significant sum of money, greatly surprising them. They asked him to join them for a good meal with their earnings. They bickered over seating arrangements in relation to Roland, but Milia managed to distract them with the idea of buying cute outfits to surprise Roland with, prompting them to immediately rush out the door. Sue lingered for a moment, about to ask why he had given them a quest with such a high reward, but ultimately decided against it, thanking him before departing. Milia then declared he had been exposed, and told him to finish work before the girls returned, to which he agreed. Meanwhile, Nil and his accomplice were engaged in the gutter cleaning quest the girls were supposed to do earlier. His accomplice complained about the stench, but Nil urged him to stop, reminding him it was a quest given by Roland and to remain humble despite their success. Another day at work brought more unexpected situations for Roland's normal life. An employee called for Roland's attention regarding someone wishing to apply as an adventurer. He noticed she hadn't filled in the reason for wanting to become one. The woman pulled down her hood, revealing her striking beauty to everyone in the guild, introducing herself as Candy Miner. Roland, unaffected by her looks, inquired about her reason for becoming an adventurer. She deemed it unnecessary, stating it was obvious she needed money. The dark-haired male produced an orb for the woman to hold her hands over, as it would measure her magic power. It glowed brightly, creating a gentle breeze that stirred Candy's clothes and hair. When she finished, the orb crackled softly, while everyone in the guild watched in awe. Roland informed the woman her nominal value was 1,000, signifying C-grade magic. People chatted, noting an S-grade value was 10,000, implying this strange woman was a powerful newcomer. Candy giggled upon learning this, feigning embarrassment as a subtle energy seemed to emanate from her, charming the male employees behind Roland against their will. Roland remained completely unaffected, as the two male employees fell to the floor, weak in the knees, while the female employees stared in disgust. Roland noted in his observations that the woman possessed an excellent amount of magical power, and could pass based on that number alone, almost exciting Candy, until he informed her she would still need to take the practical test to confirm something. She hesitated for a moment before agreeing and walking outside with the taller male. He told her there were no restrictions. She could attack him with anything, holding nothing back, as it was merely a test. Candy then effortlessly activated a magic circle beneath her, summoning a staff from the ground. The woman chuckled, asking if he was scared enough to stop the battle right there. Roland, however, stood with a blank expression, urging Candy to hurry and attack him. She was silent for a moment before telling him he shouldn't blame her if he died. Roland confidently and casually stated he wouldn't be defeated by someone who couldn't even gauge their opponent's strength. These words angered her, and she immediately thrust her staff at the taller male. He swiftly dodged it and suddenly appeared behind her. She turned, attempting to use her charm magic against him, as she had earlier, but he effortlessly dispelled it once again. Candy fell to the ground, confused, staring up at him, asking how he knew. He simply told her it was a secret. They went back inside, and Roland informed her she had passed the test, stating she would now be recognized as an adventurer and could take quests starting the next day. She, however, was more focused on the fact that a man stronger than herself existed. Yet every other man in the guild was busy trying to invite the beautiful woman to dinner, to team up with her, or even to marry her. Candy turned all of them down, stating she already had plans with Roland that night, walking off with him to an unknown location he promised would be a surprise. Eventually, they arrived at Roland's house, confusing the woman, who asked if it was a restaurant. He corrected her, stating it was his home, and was interrupted by Leela emerging to greet him, asking if he wished to bathe together. Roland inquired if she could simply say, "Welcome home," normally, but this was met with laughter, as he had never corrected her before. Suddenly, Candy seemed to recognize Leela and called out to her. Leela turned toward the woman. Leela eventually remembered who this mysterious woman was and called her Dee, jumping off the porch and embracing the woman. Leela expressed her relief that she was safe, having feared she was killed by the hero. Candy almost believed this was an imposter, but it was impossible, yet she remained confused by Leela's lack of magic power. The demon woman explained she was officially dead due to circumstances, and invited the woman in for dinner. Candy's real name was Candace Minod, a vampire affiliated with the Demon Lord's army, a fact Roland seemed to have realized quite early. He explained all the clues that made it easy for him to figure it out, especially since she could recall details from the last Great War. Leela asked the vampiric woman why she was becoming an adventurer for money and restricting her identity. Candy replied she wasn't being forced, she was simply trying to have fun. Leela asked if this fun involved manipulating men with her demon eyes, which Candy openly confirmed, claiming it was all in self-defense. Roland knew that wasn't entirely truthful, as she had tried to use it in the practical test. Candy admitted it was because he was too strong. Their exchange sparked jealousy in Leela, who told Candy she couldn't use her demon eyes on Roland. Candy was surprised to see Leela transformed into a maiden, a departure from her previous solitary self, making Leela flustered. Roland interjected, asking the vampiric woman if she intended to live as an adventurer. Candy confirmed that was her plan. Leela then offered the woman a place to stay at their house until she had accumulated enough money for her next journey. The night passed, and Roland was washing dishes with Candy. He asked her if she was fine with prolonged periods of not drinking blood. She playfully teased him about his interest in her. Roland was simply curious. She explained it was a roller coaster, but that she couldn't get enough of the horrific feeling of hunger before satisfying it with the ecstasy of sucking blood. He then asked her if she wished to suck his blood, causing the woman to become shocked and flustered, stating Leela would scold her if she did that. Roland, however, noted Leela always took long baths anyway. The next day, Candy was frustrated by the difficulty of completing enough quests to gain financial independence. Roland stated everyone started at F rank, and rewards correlated with rank, disappointing her. He advised her they should continue searching, and his ears were open to any requests she had. Candy mentioned her sensitivity to sunlight. While she could use Fire Guard to mitigate its effects, she preferred quests without sun exposure. He walked off to find a high-reward nighttime quest until he was interrupted by Iris, who handed him a letter. As the branch director departed, Milia's groans of frustration became audible. Roland asked what was wrong. The girl explained that quests nearing their deadlines were piling up, primarily nighttime tasks or unusual, high-reward requests, which seemed like a perfect opportunity. Roland asked what would happen if a quest missed its deadline. Milia explained the guild would have to inform the requester that no one accepted it, usually resulting in a reward or rank adjustment. However, Milia warned that too many such instances would erode public trust in the guild. Milia felt she might have to abandon all the requests, but Roland stated there was no need. He had someone suitable for all of them. After a while, the backlog of quests had significantly decreased, thanks to Candy's efforts. Some employees wondered what was happening with the recently canceled requests, only to discover Candy had completed them, leaving them impressed and in awe. Roland was discussing quests with the vampiric woman, processing more for her. Candy heard she was gaining recognition for her talents, but knew one of her quests required Rosie's help, as Candy disliked insects. She noticed Roland's good reputation and vowed to do her best not to tarnish his name. But Roland told her not to worry and gave her more nighttime quests to complete at her own pace. She departed to undertake these missions, and Roland continued his workday, processing many more quests for adventurers. Iris approached the dark-haired male, informing him of another letter from the same sender as before, making it the second letter. He was reading it when Nil and his accomplice burst through the guild doors, greeting him and asking for good quest recommendations. Roland turned to the two men, silent for a moment, before stating they had arrived at the opportune moment and he had a favor to ask. Making them slightly worried, he would make them clean the ditch again. Sometime later, Candy had completed enough jobs to feel capable of moving out of Roland and Leela's house. Roland wondered if she was truly going to do so, as they genuinely didn't mind her presence. The vampiric woman explained she had found an affordable inn and possessed the funds. Beyond that, she also needed to move out because she felt another hunger she wasn't going to suppress if she remained near him, and she was certain Leela wouldn't want that. Roland was impressed by her loyalty, but Candy stated it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have someone as wonderful as Leela. Just before Candy left, Leela rushed out, handing her a handmade lunchbox, prompting Candy to joke that Rosie would be jealous. She then departed. Roland asked Leela about a vampire's thirst and how Candy managed to satiate it back in Mackay. Leela explained she used to provide small amounts of human prisoners' blood. However, Leela mentioned Candy had expressed that human blood was too delicious to be consumed in small quantities. Roland wondered if he needed to be more careful around the vampiric woman, but Leela assured him there was nothing to worry about. Eventually, Candy returned to the guild for more quests. However, something was off about her. She seemed more reserved and closed off, appearing forgetful and fatigued. Roland advised the woman not to push herself too hard, or Leela would worry. But Candy seemingly corrected her attitude, stating there was nothing to be worried about. Everyone noticed Candy's presence and spoke of her with admiration as she walked out. Nil and his accomplice then entered the building to report on Roland's requested task. They informed him of what they had heard and found, prompting Roland to feel the need for his own investigation. He went around the city and deduced that Candy had not been staying in any nearby inn for the past few days, leading him to investigate the worst possible scenario first, one related to the 2 letters he had received from Sir Badal. The letters mentioned several adventurers going missing, causing Badal some concern about the number of disappearances in such a short period. Roland was worried, hoping the disappearances had nothing to do with Candy. He approached a large villa, seeing the vampiric woman standing outside. This villa was one Nil and the other man had mentioned, noting a woman had been visiting it for the past few days, making Roland wonder if she lived there. He entered the building and saw Candy entering a room from which he could hear pained screams. There was a nearby room the dark-haired male managed to break into, only to discover it was an old torture chamber. Corpses, too damaged to be recognized, lay within. He saw a locked door, implying people were held behind it. Suddenly, Candy found him there and tried to attack him. It was then he understood what was wrong. He slammed her to the ground, dispelling the hypnosis cast on her. She woke up, confused, asking Roland what was wrong, but he posed the same question, realizing the vampiric woman had no memory since one of her last quests. Roland walked to the locked door and opened it, confirming it held the kidnapped adventurers. He intended to release them. However, a man entered the room with guards, demanding to know who Roland was. Roland casually introduced himself and explained he had followed Candy, curious about her strange behavior, only to end up in the villa. The shorter male threatened to file a complaint with the guild until Roland explained the feudal lord had requested him to investigate the missing adventurers, prompting Roland to ask why people were locked in the room. The man tried to blame Candy, claiming she used her demon eyes to entice him and coerce him into these horrible acts, making Roland realize this man had been in the war before and likely knew Candy's true identity. Roland asked if a vampire's thirst was so overwhelming it could override hypnosis magic, causing the man to almost slip his words. The vampiric woman interjected, asking what was happening. Roland explained the man was exploiting her vampire identity to camouflage his hobby of torturing people. This infuriated her, implying she had likely drunk a stranger's blood. Summoning her magic, she explained vampires were prideful beings who chose which food deserved to be part of them. She killed the guards around him, and he tried to use his own magic against her until Roland punched him in the face. "Do you want to make the Dalton family your enemy?" the man gasped. Roland didn't care. He would report the matter to King Randolph, confusing the shorter male who was unaware of Roland's connection to the king. Candy felt offended on Roland's behalf, but he calmed her, stating he still needed to teach him something. He asked the man to lie on the bed in the torture room. The man began to cry and beg frantically, but Candy echoed his earlier actions, asking what he did with people who pleaded with him before they were tortured. Roland grabbed him by his hair, pulling him to the table, explaining he wasn't going to die easily. Eventually, they had killed the culprit behind the missing people and brought a sack containing his dead body to Sir Badal. Roland was explaining his desire for a healer at the location, only to be interrupted by Badal, who stated the man deserved his fate. Roland, however, continued, explaining he intended to ask the healer to heal the man, only to injure him repeatedly. Everyone in the room fell silent for a moment, until Sir Badal thanked Roland for addressing the request and resolving the case. Apparently, the man's experiences during the previous Great War had twisted him, but Roland maintained it was no excuse. He would still report it to the Dalton family, who would likely understand the situation once they saw the crime scene. Badal attempted to offer Roland a reward for his help, but he refused, excusing themselves as they departed. Candy wondered why he refused the reward. He explained he didn't do it for the reward. Roland then posed a question to the woman. How was someone of her level hypnotized by such an individual? She felt almost embarrassed, but explained that vampires became vulnerable when the sun was out, especially against magic. Roland remembered that vampires only appeared at night during the Great War, making him realize that Fire Guard only allowed vampires to operate in daylight, offering limited protection. Candy admitted it was the first time she had told a human this, but Roland's lips were sealed. As they walked back to the house, Candy began to realize the man probably hadn't known she was a vampire and had hypnotized her simply because she was a beautiful woman. Roland smacked her on the head, telling her not to underestimate humans and not to make him worry about her. She, in turn, teased that he would make her serious about him if he continued with such words. Eventually, the two returned to the house. Candy thanked Roland for saving her from being forced to drink the blood of a horrible man. She admitted the act of sucking blood was almost akin to intimacy, making her embarrassed and frustrated she had almost done it unconsciously with someone she found inferior. Candy thanked him again, but Roland didn't see it as such a significant act. Candy, however, saw it differently. She was beginning to understand why Leela loved Roland, as Candy herself was starting to feel the same. She proceeded to hug the taller male and bite into his neck, yet drew no blood. He was confused, but didn't mind. She explained it was proof of courtship, an intentional gesture to show she treasured him and loved him from the bottom of her heart. She then drew her own blood and asked him to drink it, to make her become his, which he did without hesitation, causing her to cry tears of joy. They shared a kiss and hugged again, but someone was there to witness that kiss and demanded to know what was happening. Roland tried to offer the excuse that it was how the ritual went, and Leela struggled to hold back her true feelings, yelling that she didn't believe him. Eventually, the two had put the vampiric woman to sleep. Roland attempted to explain himself again, but Leela stated there was no need. She could smell the blood on him and could guess what had happened. Roland grabbed her face, causing her to blush and pull away in surprise as he told her she didn't have to wait for him. Leela explained she did it because she wanted to, even if she hadn't expected to witness such a scene. She was glad he was safe and welcomed him back with soft eyes, proceeding to kiss him as the sun began to rise. It was another day at Roland's job, except things were slightly different. The place was bustling with adventurers, and the employees all seemed restless. The dark-haired male was confused by the sight, while Milia mentioned 3 employees had arrived from headquarters, making Roland wonder if something significant had happened. Morley interjected, scoffing at them and telling them to stop slacking off as they returned to the counters to continue helping adventurers process their requests. This seemed like another normal day at first, where nothing could go wrong, even with the occasional arguments in the guild building. However, 2 people who began arguing started to incorporate magic into their quarrel, disregarding those around them and the environment. Roland noticed what was about to happen and called out to Milia as sparks formed in the air. Before anyone knew what was going on, the building exploded. Everyone either watched in confusion or ran as employees and adventurers emerged from beneath the debris. Roland had ensured Milia was safe during the blast, while adventurers either used healing magic to aid the injured or discussed the quarrel between the 2 individuals who caused it. Milia believed it was a lover's quarrel, but Roland suspected it was something more, theorizing the explosion was a distraction. It was unthinkable, he reasoned, for 2 grown adults to cause such a scene over cheating. He pondered it further, concluding it was an act of terrorism, and was about to rush off to apprehend them until the culprits had already taken responsibility and apologized. Iris walked out, bewildered by the mess. Milia and Roland decided to leave the matter to the branch director, who seemingly let the couple off with a stern warning, despite what had happened. Regardless of the punishment, the guild had to temporarily close for repairs, which reminded Iris about representatives from headquarters visiting the guild and giving them a large sum of money. People assumed this would be used for repairs, but Iris instructed them to use it for a recreational trip. all the employees boarded carriages and set off for their vacation destination. Milia leaned out the window with a happy expression, to which Iris warned her against such dangerous behavior. Milia apologized. Leela huffed in annoyance at the girl's excitement until Roland asked Leela, who had forgotten her wallet because she was looking forward to the trip, silencing the demon woman. Iris was surprised to see Roland willing to attend such an event, but he knew he was only coming because Leela wanted to go. Leela herself spoke up again, asking him why he was in a carriage filled only with women. He replied it was merely a coincidence. He was popular, and he was living a perfectly normal life, a value of Roland's that Leela still struggled to comprehend. Milia asked what he was mumbling about. He dismissed it as the girl continued the conversation, mentioning she had brought her swimsuit, causing all the other girls in the carriage to complain about not bringing their own. Iris began checking shop lists with a flustered face, while Leela, with a questioning tone, spoke about swimsuits, making Roland wonder if they didn't exist in the demon world. After the long carriage journey, everyone entered their accommodation and went to their respective rooms. Leela, back in her cat form, sat happily on the bed as Milia entered the room, asking if he wanted to go sightseeing with her. The girl was surprised to see Leela there, as she wasn't an employee, but Leela told her not to sweat the details. The demon woman suddenly jumped out of bed and declared she was taking Milia out to buy a swimsuit. Roland apologized and asked Milia to take care of Leela, giving the girl no choice but to agree. They left. Later that day, Candy entered the room, complaining about him overworking her. He asked the vampiric woman if she had discovered anything about drugs being involved in nearby areas. She hugged him, laying in his arms, explaining her findings. A drug called Second was popular in the red light district, offering temporary pleasure but leading to addiction, making Roland realize the troublesome nature of the situation. Candy had scouted the area for a few days and found a suspicious shop Roland wanted to be shown. Roland had initiated this entire investigation due to a letter from Elvie, which mentioned a drug circulating within a certain region of her country. Roland and Candy stumbled upon an alleyway where a man was talking to Milia, telling her she could earn a lot of money working at their shop. The two recognized Milia, and Roland wondered where Leela had gone, while Candy explained to the taller male that the man speaking to Milia was rumored to be a primary drug distributor. He walked into the alleyway and told Candy to look for Leela while the strange man attempted to pull Milia in a certain direction. Roland intervened, incapacitating the man. Milia was surprised to see Roland there, but he informed her that following the man would lead to dire consequences. She was shocked by his words and was told to return to the inn while Roland conversed with the man, instructions she hesitantly followed. Roland looked down at the freckled man and immediately asked about the drug, but the stranger pretended not to know anything until Roland broke one of his fingers, causing the man to scream. The dark-haired male asked again, threatening to break another finger until the man relented, admitting he was told to find good-looking women and give them the drug he was provided. Roland believed this man was the sole distributor until the man explained there were 3 others as well, asking why Roland was making such a big deal of it. These words angered Roland. He grabbed the man by the collar, informing him the drug was a poison, rotting people's bodies and minds, making them forget who they were and unable to live without it people, including the man's acquaintances, girlfriend, and family. The stranger was bewildered and shocked by this new information. He then told Roland his master was a red-haired, sharp-eyed man who visited the shop periodically, agreeing to lead Roland to the shop. As the 2 men walked, the man explained his master visited the shop twice a week to replenish the drug, and that the drug was likely stored in a warehouse in Kotka. He also detailed how many women were addicted to the drug. They eventually reached the shop, and Roland, satisfied with their progress, instructed the man to dispose of the drug after leaving, which the man agreed to without hesitation. He left, surprised to find his fingers were no longer broken. Roland proceeded to investigate the area, finding a gate behind the building. He recalled Rosie's words. The person who cast the gate was likely on par with Rosie or stronger. Roland stepped through it, landing on a hill near the mansion of Baron Marty Cuser. Guards told him to leave. He was surprised a feudal lord was involved in the matter. He then used his assassin skills to sneak past the guards, staring at a room at the top of the mansion before easily climbing to the third floor. The man on the balcony, shocked, asked who Roland was. Roland, despite it being a clear lie, stated he was a guest. The Baron tried to call for guards, as Roland explained he was from the Special Public Safety Division of the Farron Kingdom. Also a lie, but not far from the truth. He informed Marty Cuser he had heard about a strange drug circulating and was there to investigate. But the Baron insisted he could do whatever he wanted in his own territory. Roland countered that the land belonged to the kingdom. Marty Cuser, however, insisted the people existed only to benefit their lord, drawing his sword and yelling he was the law. The dark-haired male dodged the attack, called the Baron a pig, then knocked him out, telling him to learn to be normal. The Baron was brought before the king, along with Roland, to explain the situation Randolph was completely unaware of. The drug was now banned in the Fend Kingdom, and those who manufactured, distributed, and used it would be punished. The Baron himself would be stripped of his title, territory, and assets. He was being led away until Roland spoke up, stating he wished to ask questions about who made the drug, as he already knew it was a demon's work. But before anything else could happen, the Baron began to scream and chant about being killed. Earlier, Milia and Leela were together, walking through the bustling markets of their vacation spot. The girl wondered what style Leela preferred, only to discover Leela didn't know what a swimsuit was, utterly confused why people wouldn't simply go naked. Milia grew frantic, telling the demon woman that nakedness was indecent and impermissible. Leela still insisted people could just remove their clothes in the water, as they wouldn't be seen by others. The girl began to dramatically explain that maidens were all about wearing cute clothes, and how it was their longing to wear these clothes to show them to the person they liked. They entered the shop together. Milia began showing Leela around before picking something out and asking if the swimsuit would look cute on her, to which Leela replied it wasn't bad and asked the girl if she could pick something out for her. Milia wasn't opposed to the idea, but felt anything would suit Leela due to her enviable beauty. However, Leela seemed to notice someone in the distance within the crowd and began to run off after them before Milia could notice where she went. This was how the two had become separated. Leela ran through the crowd, continuously chasing this mysterious man with a coat swaying from his shoulders. She followed him until he stopped at a warehouse building. The demon woman wondered if she should call out to him, but she didn't want to be mistaken and create an embarrassing scene. After following the man and not seeing his face clearly, Leela watched him enter the building and attempted to open the door herself. However, it didn't budge. She stared through the window with a pout as someone walked behind her, that person being Candy. The vampiric woman informed Leela that Roland was looking for her, but Leela couldn't leave, as she believed Luther, her brother, was alive and had seen him enter the building next door. Candy looked inside the building and felt the situation was escalating, unsure she could handle things if Luther was involved. Leela asked what was inside the sacks. Candy was about to explain until the very man they believed was alive walked out and greeted them with a grin. The demon woman was excited to see him, but he questioned if she was truly his sister, as he sensed no magic power from her, to which she said she would explain later. Candy approached, asking Luther what he was doing at the warehouse, but he only glared at the vampiric woman, sending a wave of energy over her that left her feeling weakened. He told her to be gone. Leela tried to tell her brother they should return to the demon world, but he dismissed that world as boring, claiming he could truly be himself in the human world. The food was delicious, the women beautiful, and he wouldn't be compared with a genius. Luther asked Candy what she knew, to which the vampiric woman lied until Luther continued, stating the demon lord was dead, as there was no demon lord without magic power. Candy realized what was happening and urged Leela to run, as everyone in the army knew Luther despised Leela's existence. The man himself claimed the Leela in front of him was just a fake. He activated his powers, and Candy stepped in to protect Leela, but she was unfortunately stabbed through the gut in seconds. Leela stared in shock and disbelief at what had transpired. Luther knelt, admitting to his sister he had always despised her but was glad she was now just a small fry. He attempted to kill her as well, but she neither moved nor flinched, knowing Roland would save her, kicking Luther away. The dark-haired male called Luther lesser, but Luther was overconfident, seeing Roland as merely human. Leela explained this man was her brother. Roland recognized him as one of the army commanders, telling the demon man he had changed his mind about capturing him. Roland informed Luther he could kill him, making Leela flinch in surprise as she stared silently despite her sad expression. Roland tried to extract any information about the drugs from Luther, but Luther refused to speak, instead attacking Roland. The ex-assassin dodged it with ease, recognizing the technique, but observed Luther's shortcomings in every category of skill, then asked him if he had merely been bullying the weak. Roland realized he could fight Luther while talking, while his sister gave him no quarter in their battles, implying even he could use the same technique. Luther was shocked to see a human employ it, but Roland told him not to underestimate humans. Leela walked up to her brother, explaining how Roland had defeated her, confusing him as to why she was siding with a human and how she was an embarrassment to the demon race. Roland punched him again, stating Leela was still worried about her subordinates after the war. The demon woman agreed she was an embarrassment, having ended up loving Roland. Hearing this, Luther believed even more that Leela was unfit to be the demon lord. She attempted to explain that the inferiority of races wasn't important, but that only angered him, as she didn't deserve to say that after how many comrades had died because of her. Leela agreed, acknowledging that in the past, many bloodthirsty factions had been an issue she tried to avoid, and that was one of the reasons she waged war. Being responsible was also one of the demon lord's duties, but she had grown fed up with everything until meeting Roland gave her the opportunity to change. Luther wondered how powerful Roland was to change Leela so profoundly before he decided to lie down in defeat, declaring the situation boring, to which Roland agreed before killing Luther. Roland and Leela walked off with Candy in his arms. He asked about spirit magic, a technique banned in the demon world due to the burden it placed on the caster. The dark-haired male, however, didn't care. He would revive Candy, no matter the risk. She hoped he succeeded, as she didn't want him to die. They walked into the forest and placed Candy's body down on the grass. Roland began to use spirit magic on the vampiric woman. Everything glowed brightly, and pieces of his skin began to peel and fly off him. Leela cried out to him as everything went white. Roland seemed to have just now awakened. He stretched his body, complaining about how heavy it felt, to which Leela yelled at him that it was to be expected, as he had used high-level magic. He didn't see the problem, as it had only been 2 days, and he asked her about the time she had used it herself. She admitted she had used it on her pet, Ortenberg, in the past. She complained about his condition, stating he needed more rest, but Roland still needed to discover who was distributing the drug. Leela mentioned, second, was a pain-killing drug in the demon world, once a powder but now a liquid medicine. She noted it wasn't harmful to demons, but seemed to have a side effect on humans. She wondered how her brother had acquired all this knowledge. Candy then walked into the room, explaining she seemed perfectly healthy, thanks to Roland. Candy was surprised, finding it convenient that her vampire thirst was now gone, and urged Roland to hurry, making him confused as Leela seemed to be hiding something from him. After he was made to get ready, Roland was brought to the beach where everyone was in swimsuits. Leela complained about how she couldn't go naked. Everyone greeted Roland, glad he had recovered, and began conversing. Then they grew confused as to why Roland was stretching. He casually stated he was going to swim to the island on the other side. The girls were confused why he would do that when they were already having fun, but his mind was made up. So, the girls decided to coerce Leela into removing her towel, as she wouldn't be able to play with them otherwise. The demon woman finally removed the towel and walked off to play with the others while Roland did some swimming. The day passed quickly, and everyone was exhausted. Candy then asked where Iris and Milia were. Roland explained they had gone to prepare for a barbecue. Suddenly, people began crowding around someone, proclaiming an elf had washed ashore, only for Roland and the two others to realize it was Rosie. This was apparently Rosie's true form, but their focus was on the fact that she was in the sea at all. They decided to dismiss it and joined Iris and Milia, who had finished the barbecue, eating happily until night eventually came. The next day, Milia attempted to see if Roland was doing anything with Leela, but he stated she had gone shopping, making the girl excited. She asked him if they could go on a stroll, to which he agreed. She told him to meet her in 30 minutes. He closed the door on the excited girl, then checked how much money he possessed. During that, Candy walked in and asked if he was free that evening, to which he hesitated, pondered, then confirmed. She told him to come to the rocky area along the coast to have fun, offering no further explanation before leaving. Roland went to prepare for the day as Iris walked in to ask if he had plans, only to discover Milia had invited him somewhere, disappointing her. He spoke up again, thanking Iris for yesterday and expressing his gladness that Leela and Candy were also happy. Iris sighed, noting how she was surrounded by pretty girls all the time, before buttoning up his shirt and telling him not to overdo it. They both left the room as she informed him she would be observing the branches work in their area due to a note she received. Roland went to meet up with Milia. They walked off together. Milia commented it felt like a date, making Roland realize her intentions. Roland bought something from one of the markets, and Milia, realizing the time, began to think about lunch before finding a seafood restaurant. He remembered Candy and told Milia he was going to the restroom, then sprinted toward the coast, jumping down to silently land near the vampiric woman who was sighing about his whereabouts. He greeted her, pretending he had already been there, before realizing the fun she spoke of was fishing. He cast his line and wondered if two people were needed, to which she said it was, as they could have fun while waiting. Roland, however, had no time for fun. Roland stated something had been caught and gave Candy the rod, before diving into the water and summoning shadows to pull on the fishing line, confusing Candy as to what was tugging it. Roland was able to leap back and made his way back to the restaurant to Milia, who was shocked to see him drenched. He lied, claiming it was sweat from stomach pain and that they should focus on eating, proceeding to chat during their meal as two little shadows informed the dark-haired male that they needed his help. He needed to leave again. Milia wondered if she needed to get medicine, but he told her he would get it himself and ran out again to buy a large fish before running toward the coast again. He jumped into the water to attach the fish to the line. Candy pulled it out of the water, confused as to why it was dead, until Roland walked up to her and convinced her it was because it had exhausted its strength, making her want to have it for dinner with him. He apologized, stating he had plans and would make it up to her in the near future before quickly leaving back to the restaurant where Milia was confused about the seaweed on his head. But they continued their food and left the building. The girl was happy his stomach ache was healed. She was about to ask if they could do something else now, but he noticed Leela in the distance, which made him dismiss Milia, telling her he would treat her after he recovered, making her smile at the thought. Roland walked off to greet Leela, who was seemingly having fun by herself before the dark-haired male gave her a gift. She snatched it from his hands and placed it in her hair. He complimented it, and she was now in a good mood, not asking why he was wet. Leela said she wanted to treat him to dinner as thanks for the gift and found a good seafood restaurant. Roland thought she meant the one he and Milia went to, but Leela pulled him in another direction and said they would walk with just the two of them for a while. Meanwhile, in the hospital, Rosie was in bed, mumbling to herself while the nurses reported she kept having bad dreams, seeming as though she had been abandoned. The next day, Leela and Roland were in bed after their dinner and fun. She pointed at the scar on his stomach, mentioning how she hadn't noticed it back at the beach, surprised that even someone like him could get hurt. Roland agreed, stating there were more scars, proceeding to turn over and reveal the several scars on his back. Even with that, Leela still wondered and was curious as to why there was only that one scar on the front of his body. Her eyes stared with anticipation, but Roland told the demon woman it was not an interesting story, and that he was simply just inexperienced at the time of the scar. Leela was surprised by his refusal and felt almost disappointed before Roland went off to get ready for the day. He went to work and was greeted by a D-rank adventurer named Sasha Grid, who asked if she could have a high-reward request. Roland looked through the quests and found a security quest where torrential rain had recently destroyed the main bridge, forcing the use of an old road as a detour. She examined it as Roland explained the road was narrow and had many passers-by whom she would have to protect until the bridge was repaired. Sasha turned to leave, stating she would try the quest for one day, and if it suited her, she would accept it. Later that day, a horse with a messenger on it burst into the guild, informing everyone there was a problem. A large gate hawk had appeared on the old road, and the adventurers on site couldn't handle it. The man requested they make an official request to Lord Badel and have it treated as an emergency quest. Employees grew frantic, shouting about the quest form, the information needed, and the time it would take for the feudal lord to review it. They decided it was a B-rank quest and needed to find adventurers, pondering how the emergency quest had come at a bad time and if they might need to seek help from other guilds. Suddenly, Iris walked in, shouting for everyone to calm down. Everyone immediately stopped what they were doing as Iris's eyes focused on Roland. She approached the dark-haired male and asked if he could handle the situation, as the safety of the people on the old road was their top priority. He accepted the task without hesitation and proceeded to borrow the messenger's horse while all the employees questioned if Roland was truly going there, empty-handed. Roland stated that all he needed was his own body, and everyone in the building stared in awe at his coolness before he swiftly departed, seemingly remembering the one scar on the front of his body. He rode the horse into the forest, knowing that gate hawks were dangerous demon birds that consumed humans and primarily lived in mountainous areas, so encountering them on the old road wasn't strange. However, no one had ever seen them there, so the potential danger hadn't been included in the quest. Roland knew a large gate hawk could swallow an adult, so he needed to act fast. He stumbled upon some adventurers shouting for help regarding the bird they encountered. He asked if they knew an adventurer named Sasha, remembering the girl they had been with before, then mentioned she was further down the road, as she had claimed she would do something about the bird. The dark-haired male quickly rode off again, despite the two adventurers' warnings, but they were unaware of Roland's true skill. Sasha was seen fighting against the large bird, while other adventurers lay on the ground, bleeding. Sasha continuously shot arrows at the gate hawk, but it did not deter. The large monster intimidated Sasha before swooping in to consume her, causing her to fall to the ground and scream in fear, awaiting death. But death never came. She opened her eyes to find Roland directly in front of her, throwing stones at the gate hawk before he leaped up and plunged a sword through its head, killing it. Sasha ran up to Roland, thanking him, disappointed she couldn't handle the gate hawk after realizing its immense size. But then something else caught her attention. His glasses were broken, and without the accessory, his appearance was recognizable. This was apparently the second time he had saved her. But Roland tried to claim she was mistaken and proceeded to return to the guild to report the situation while she waited for the rescue team. As he rode off, he was surprised someone remembered him, but he didn't dwell on the thought, returning to the guild. When Roland returned to the guild, the employees were seemingly reenacting what had happened just before he left, talking about how cool he was, clearly audible to him. Sasha looked over her shoulder, noticing his good reputation within the guild, and heard that all adventurers in the city said the same thing, causing him to state he was honored to be spoken about positively. The girl pouted, saying he didn't put his heart into his words. He then told her there were no D-rank quests with good rewards that day, so she decided to try other rank quests. Roland remembered an E-rank quest, gathering gooseberries, an ingredient for recovery medicine. Despite what he told her, she seemed focused on something else. How Roland truly looked different with glasses on, even if they had no lenses. Sasha asked him why he had lied to her. He insisted he hadn't, stating he wore the glasses purely for fashion, causing her to laugh at his response. He gave her the quest, and Sasha decided to accept it. He recommended that if an unexpected monster appeared, as it had the other day, she should immediately flee. She reminded him she was a D-rank adventurer and asked if he was a worrywart. He, however, told the girl he only said such things to people likely to do reckless things and people likely to fail, making her complain about his mean words. To cut the conversation short, he apologized and informed her she was holding up everyone else in line. As she turned, she saw the many people waiting behind her. Sasha ran off, smiling, saying she would finish the quest quickly and return, then left. Milia walked up to Roland and asked about her. Roland stated the girl was suspicious of him for some reason, and Milia jumped to the conclusion, thinking Sasha was a stalker. The dark-haired male didn't believe that, even though Milia continued insisting it could be a possibility, telling him that if anything troubled him, he could consult with her. As she ran off, she wondered if it was true he had saved her, making her understand the feeling of wanting to stalk him. Roland stared at the guild's front doors, thinking about Sasha, believing she would have become a slave even if she survived after he saved her. He dismissed the thought and continued his workday, helping many adventurers with their requests as usual. At some point, Milia stretched, declaring that having a normal life was the best. The word normal caught Roland's attention, making him stare at her as she asked if she had overreacted, to which he said she hadn't. Milia mentioned she hated rushing things and would mess up because of it before remembering she would be visiting his house that day after work to teach Leela how to cook. As the girl walked off to continue her work, he pondered her words, thinking it was a wise quote. Later, the employees were cleaning up the guild, preparing to go home, as Roland continued to stare outside the door. Milia approached him, confused, asking why he was looking outside. He explained he was waiting for Sasha after she had left to do her gathering quest. Both he and Milia wondered if something had happened to her during it. He decided to check it out after all and told Milia to relay the message to Leela, then got on a horse and rode off into the forest where the gathering quest was supposed to take place. In the forest, two men had apparently knocked Sasha out and were discussing what to do with her, deciding they would sell her after, having their way with her. One of them mentioned she was an adventurer and likely already used by many men, and that adding them to wouldn't make a change. Proceeding to start undressing the unconscious girl while both undressed themselves, talking about how they wouldn't care about waking her up. What the two men didn't notice was Roland grabbing a stick and lighting it aflame before applying it to the rears of the two men, causing them to shout in pain and fall to the ground, asking who Roland was. He refused to answer their questions and told them to be gone before he used one of their swords to cut off their things and use them as firewood. This didn't immediately scare them away, as he stepped on one of their rears and asked if he wanted him to put the sword into them, causing them to have horrified looks before they tried to run away. Eventually, Sasha woke up, realizing she was being held by Roland as they rode back to the city on his horse. She asked what had happened. He omitted the truth, stating she had merely hit her head and gone unconscious in the woods. The girl wondered why he was there. He claimed he had an employee hunch. She then said this situation marked the third time he had saved her, to which he disagreed, claiming it was the second. He brought her back and told Sasha to go to the hospital if she didn't feel well, then prepared to leave before she grabbed his shirt, wanting to say something. Sasha hesitated for a moment before asking Roland if she wasn't good enough for him, as she wished to offer her thanks just for one night. Roland slapped her hand away and told her not to misunderstand the situation. He quickly returned to his house and was greeted by Leela, who was surprised he returned so quickly. Leela mentioned Milia would be late, and Roland responded dryly, making the demon woman wonder what was wrong with him, as he had been absent-minded for the past few days. She raised an eyebrow and jokingly teased him, asking if Iris had bullied him, but she still cared and hugged him close, telling him she could lend an ear if he truly wished to talk about it. Roland sighed, stating it was not a fun story, but Leela insisted it was fine to hear, making him take off his glasses before admitting the scar on his stomach was sustained during his third mission as an assassin. Something, he explained, always happened in his past. He still recalled all the required information for each assassination, and how he had to accomplish this specific one before dawn. His master, Amy, had instructed him to perform well, as he would always panic with unexpected events, and that he should adapt to the situation and never forget her constant refrain in their line of work. Something would always happen. Roland was about to carry out the assassination only to realize someone had already completed it for him. But he had already revealed himself and couldn't process the situation, leaving him unable to adapt. Suddenly, the man's daughter opened the door, and the mystery assassin attempted to stab the girl until Roland intervened, taking the blow himself before slashing the assassin back. That was how he got the scar on his stomach. Leela patted his head for comfort as he explained his master had scolded him while treating him, but he knew it was expected. He was an inexperienced kid despite having memorized everything, as reality was a completely different matter. He knew he would have succeeded if he were just a minute earlier, but he had failed and was plagued with guilt after learning the daughter's whereabouts were unknown. Leela heard about Milia seeing a female adventurer lately and asked if that was the girl, to which Roland agreed, stating he was atoning for his sins. Leela, however, told him not to shoulder the sins of other people. Roland admitted he would have forgotten about it if he were still an assassin, but as he was now, he wanted to try to help the girl. Leela told him he should and would allow it, still surprised to hear he was stabbed so young. She assumed he was about 17 at the time until he stated he was around 11, shocking her. He explained the day his master picked him up was his 5th birthday, and the third assassination was 6 years after that. The exact age might be slightly off, but it shouldn't be far from that. After that day, he never got stabbed from the front again. Leela told him he could always share his stories with her, as she was always his ally, causing Roland to smile and kiss Leela, making her excited. Another day at the guild, and Sasha was there, claiming she wanted to take a quest from Roland. Milia tried to explain Roland wasn't there, but Sasha could clearly see him over Milia's shoulder, to which Milia insisted Roland was busy. The dark-haired male was confused why Milia came up with that lie before the other employees gossiped about Milia trying to keep Sasha away from Roland. Roland, seeing it only in a professional light, stated it was normal for adventurers to choose the employee they trusted most, something the others agreed with, if not for Roland's lack of empathy. The others explained there were no other adventurers, and that this situation was a sign from God, telling Roland to continue observing the situation, even if he believed it would be more efficient to switch places with him. The two girls continued arguing until Sasha had to admit she was there simply to see Roland. But Milia still refused as the argument continued while the others stared with bewildered faces. Morley then interrupted them, stating it was not a temp agency, but they simply told him to shut up and go away, offending him as he began yelling at Sasha for calling him old. He declared he would give the girl advice. People shouldn't be obsessive over those they're interested in, or they would face muscular fathers or hostile rejection experiences he himself had endured. One of the employees was confused until another explained Morley would follow women interested in Roland, attempting to flirt with them until they were so creeped out they would move away, something he began to cry about as Sasha and Milia didn't know what to do. Roland decided to take over as Morley was led away. Roland asked Sasha how he could help her. She apologized for disturbing him and said she desperately wanted to talk to him, so he decided to take her outside and let her speak. She informed him she had been reflecting on everything. The girl told him she would no longer trouble him because she was moving somewhere else, a statement that didn't worry him. Sasha noticed how many women were trying to get his attention and said she didn't think she would ever meet him again, but she was glad he had saved her as a child. He still tried to deny it, but she insisted. However, after reflecting on her past and current circumstances, she finally understood that the girl from the mansion no longer existed, along with the same man who saved her that night. She was just an adventurer, and he was just a guild employee. She had come to the guild to say goodbye, so she wouldn't be lost in her past anymore. Roland asked her if she had plans, making her joke about his concern until she said anything could happen, as she was an adventurer. Sasha thanked him one last time and shook his hand before leaving. Roland then asked about Iris, who was eavesdropping behind a tree. She apologized, claiming it was Milia's doing, before Iris told him he shouldn't mix public and private matters, surprising him. He walked off, stating there was someone else she needed to say that to before him. In another day of Roland's normal life as a guild employee, he received a letter from headquarters. He was about to read it until someone at the counter called out. He walked up, informing the girl it was lunch break, causing her to groan in disappointment until he recognized her as Carolina Belsley, a person who had applied to become an adventurer but was never examined. Roland remembered the incomplete form and told her he was the examiner and could begin the exam immediately, to which she agreed. The girl tried to say he could call her Lena, but he continued with her formal name. He explained he would ask some questions before measuring her magic. Once the questions were done, she was instructed to place her hands on the orb, but Carolina wished to skip the measurement. Roland, however, insisted it was required. She tried to argue she didn't plan to fight or take combat quests, but he explained that gathering quest locations required adventurers to be prepared to fight in emergencies, causing her to pout, as he was correct. He wondered what to do with the girl and suggested they do the practice exam in the nearby square, yet she wanted to skip that as well. Roland stated she would fail otherwise, but Carolina believed her poison-resistant skill would help. Roland then asked why she wanted to become an adventurer. She admitted she simply wanted to become an herbalist, making him realize that becoming an adventurer would be her first milestone, which she agreed to, as many others had managed to become adventurers in the guild. If she failed, she would go to another guild, as she truly believed she could help others by joining parties. Roland learned her resistance to poison would reduce its effect by 10%. He thought about it for a moment before stating it was a wonderful skill, causing her to blush and stare in shock. It was the first time anyone had ever said that to her. He decided he would pass her under one condition. He informed her about the guild's regional differences and how there was an area called the Elenfatine Wetlands, which had a hot and humid climate. Quests had started to appear there that regularly dealt with poison, and that poison made people investigating the place dizzy and nauseated. The girl grew excited by the idea of this quest, as it should be safe for her, and she realized that taking quests near this wetland was the condition. She thanked Roland, as this was her 6th guild to ask, and she was almost losing hope. Roland felt he was about to lose hope as well, as he was bad at dealing with those types of people as he watched her leave, but the situation was now resolved. Later, Roland asked an adventurer if he wanted to take a quest, but he seemed silent and stressed. Roland suggested the man could take a quest another day if he felt unwell. The man grew frantic and stammered until he told Roland to stop, seducing a girl he knew named Marissa. Roland was confused until the man continued, before being interrupted by Nil and his accomplice threatening the man for saying such words to Roland. Roland, however, told them that threatening people wasn't allowed. The two apologized to Roland before being told to apologize to the man. Both Roland and the man apologized to each other. Roland brought the topic back as the man, whose name was Gil, explained Marissa was his childhood friend, and that she was taking more quests than usual since she felt the receptionist was cool and would praise her after her hard work or scold her when she did poorly. Roland wanted to be that kind of receptionist until Gil explained Marissa was talking about him and asked Roland to stop giving Marissa quests. Roland knew this was all because of jealousy. After a quick few confirmations, Roland stated he would accept the terms if Gil confessed his feelings to Marissa, shocking and nervous Gil until he decided to accept the conditions. Milia wondered what would happen and felt excited, deeming herself the love police. The next day, Milia's answers were found as Gil returned with Marissa, announcing they were now together. Gil thanked Roland for his help. Marissa whispered to the dark-haired male, asking him to keep it a secret that she had also consulted with him. The lovers departed as Nil and his accomplice stared in confusion about childhood friends, girlfriends, and lovers, then began to cry and beg Roland to teach them how to be popular, causing him to become a love consultant for a while.